If you thought the first arc of Feral was disturbing, you have no idea. This next section is more disturbing than Stray Dogs and cranks the horror factor up by 10. While the gang was mostly on the run before, in this arc they find themselves trapped in the hands of an enigmatic and unsettling cat lady. I don't want to spoil anything in the intro, but this is one of the creepiest scenarios I've seen in any recent horror comic, and somehow keeps getting more disturbing as the story unfolds. So prepare to get uncomfortable. This is the cat lady arc of Feral. Hello friends, this is Grief speaking, and today I'm covering more Feral, the disturbing cat-focused horror comic from the creator of Stray Dogs, and featuring the same unassuming cartoonish art style. If you happen to miss part 1, you can check it out in the link below, and I'll do a really quick recap at the start to get everyone caught up, but I have to say, do not skip this arc. I wasn't exaggerating before. This has some really great horror moments that you cannot miss. As I said, I don't want to spoil too much, so let's get right into it. This is Feral Explained, the Cat Lady arc. Last time in Feral, a massive rabies outbreak hit Creek County, turning pets and wild animals into aggressive zombie-like creatures. Elsie, Patch, and Lord were taken by animal control but ended up stranded in the forest after their truck crashed. Patch gets scratched by an infected raccoon slowly turning him, and the group runs into rabid foxes, wolves, and even other cats. Things get worse when they realize men in hazmat suits are hunting down anything on 4 legs. They meet another small house cat named Gigi and an outdoor cat named Jonas who guides and protects them, and eventually they make it back to their house. It's now abandoned, but they do discover their neighbor's dog, Petey, infected and locked in the basement. A fight breaks out and they manage to trap him outside, but right after, Patch reveals a dark secret. Years ago, Elsie led Lord into the woods and left him there. He was later found starving, bloody, and missing his tail, and he just hasn't been the same since. Lord didn't remember this and runs off in anger at the betrayal. At the same time, Patch finally turns from the infection. Jonas fights off Patch and saves the others, but in a shocking twist is shot by the hazmat crew. Elsie and Gigi escape to a barn where Gigi gives birth. It turns out she was pregnant the entire time. Meanwhile, Patch escapes the house bleeding into the snow, which leads us directly into the new story arc, The Cat Lady. Chapter 6, Patchwork. Patch is wandering bloody through the snow, and we get to see his stream of consciousness. He just wants to find Elsie and Lord. He's thirsty but is afraid of the water, and is hungry but his throat is burning. He catches a glimpse of what appears to be Elsie in the woods and chases after her, apologizing for what he'd done, saying he had no control over his actions. He wonders if Elsie found Lord, and she finally responds to him, telling him that they're together and happy. Then she just lays in on him, saying how he never had any direction, and she calls him a coward for never stepping up. She says he's shameful and weak, they're not his family, and that they're all better off without him. Then she takes a swipe at him and shows her teeth. Of course, this isn't really Elsie. In reality, Patch has encountered a rabies-infected dog, and he's angry. The dog viciously snaps and claws at Patch, foam oozing from its jaw as it tries to take a bite out of him. The dog is brutal and won't let up, slashing and biting Patch in a bloody mess. In the midst of this, Patch has a flashback to when he first joined the family. He's just a kitten, and a little girl calls him Patch because of the dark spot around his eye. She immediately asks her father if she can keep him, but the father is hesitant. They're not sure if he'll get along with Elsie. Well, she talks him into it, and they bring little Patch home. Elsie is immediately territorial and hisses at Patch. She keeps him at a distance, but in a montage we see them slowly warming to each other, ending with Patch, Elsie, and Lord all cuddling in a cat bed. It cuts back to the present, and we get possibly the most eerie panel of the comic so far. Patch's eyes have gone full red again, and we see him standing over the dog's corpse, having just killed it. We can see the damage he did to the poor dog, who's laying in a pool of blood with its belly ripped out. He finally walks away, repeating that he needs to get back to Lord and Elsie, leaving behind a fresh trail of blood. Love him or hate him, Patch does not die easily, and I did not expect him to be alive at this point, let alone partially sane. Chapter 7, Sheltered Cats. Out in the forest, Elsie stands on a tall branch crying out for Lord. It's unclear how much time has passed, but it seems like it's been at least a month, since the kittens are older and can move around on their own. Speaking of which, we have Ash, Eleanor, and Milo. They're playing in the barn when Ash spots a rat and moves in to kill it. However, she sneezes, scaring it away, and it takes off out of the barn. The kittens aren't supposed to leave, but Ash can't help it and chases after the rodent despite the warnings of Eleanor. They chase the rat cat to a small pile of wood, and as they approach it, it suddenly bursts open and several rabies-infected rats jump out. It looks like the tables have turned. The kittens are terrified and don't want to get bitten, only because their mom would get mad. It seems like they have no idea what would actually happen if they got scratched or bitten. These disgusting rats are terrifying, but the idea of one of the kittens getting infected is making me very nervous. Elsie jumps in to save them, batting the little pests aside and urging the kids to get to the barn. They stop to try and defend themselves for a minute, but Elsie tells them to go and not look back. The rats then turn to look at their new target. Milo asks her what she's gonna do, and she simply responds, "Grown-up stuff." She makes a horrifying face, showing her teeth and hissing at the creatures. Inside the barn, it looks like Gigi was up in the rafters trying to seal up holes. She starts to scold them about leaving the barn, and then the scared kittens tell her what happened. Soon after, the rats barge into the barn covered in bloody scratches. The kittens climb up to their mother and crawl out through a hole that she had just finished patching. They get onto the roof and jump to a nearby branch where they find Elsie waiting. They rush towards the nearby creek since the bad kind doesn't like water, and as they run, Gigi asks Elsie, "Where were you?" Elsie desperately tries to apologize for leaving the kittens to look for Lord. They make it to the other side of the creek using a log and push it into the water before the rats can get across, sinking them into the icy creek. Gigi asks the kittens if any of them are bitten or scratched and has them check their buddy to be sure. It looks like they're all good, but man, it's kind of sad watching the procedure because it's clear that they've been through this before. It's off-putting seeing a kindergarten-like drill being run on these kittens when they're actually checking to see if they're going to become a zombie. Once it's clear they're fine, Gigi turns to Elsie and tells her she needs to be better. She misses Lord too, but right now these kittens are all that matters and she needs to get her priorities straight. They start to climb the trees again when the kittens smell something nearby. They all look over and see some fresh fish laying in the snow. Since they've just been eating bugs for the last few weeks, the kittens are awestruck and start to move in. But Gigi stops them, telling them if you don't know where it's from, there's a good chance it's not safe. The kittens suggest maybe people left it out for them, like the good people that they've always heard about. But Gigi says that they don't know if there are any good people anymore. Well, that's a depressing thought. Milo says he's starving and that his tummy is growly. He can't resist and slowly moves in on one of the fish. Well, it's a trap, and a metal cage closes around the whole group. Gigi freaks out, screaming her head off, until Elsie warns her she'll only draw attention to them. The kittens are just happy to eat and naively chow down on the fish. Elsie points out that the rats can get to them in here, so they'll need to find a way out fast, but something worse than rats show up. Foxes. They circle the cage and prepare to attack when they're distracted by bright lights. A car rolls up, scaring the foxes away, and a mysterious human figure gets out. They pick up the cage and bring it to their car and then drive off. The cats are tossed around the cage as the person drives like a maniac on the mountain road. In the background, there's a radio news report that gives us a little more insight into the rabies outbreak. It's clear that in the following weeks, the virus has spread drastically across the northeastern US to the point where the government is issuing a relief package to affected areas. Finally, they arrive at an old rural house and the mysterious person grabs the cage, bringing the cats with them. Gigi makes the kids promise whatever they see inside, they need to run as soon as the crate is opened and hide. Milo asks what's in there and why she's so scared, but she just says she has a really bad feeling. The stranger opens the door to the house and inside we see dozens of cats. Right in the middle is none other than Lord. I guess they're not the first to be captured, and it looks like maybe they've finally found a new home. Chapter 8, The Cat House. Elsie is sleeping in a dreamlike state when she's woken up by the cat spirit. This is a Mufasa-like apparition that Elsie sometimes sees and speaks with. The spirit tells her there's no time for sleep, but Elsie argues that she's finally in a safe place that's warm, and her and Lord are back together. The great cat tells her that she's not safe and that she's really alone. It adds that she's not prepared and has become more pest than beast. The cruel spirit tells her that she's not earned forgiveness from Lord and never will unless she wakes up. No one is safe as long as she's here. We then see in reality Elsie sleeping under a bed on a filthy floor when she's woken up for real this time by a yellow cat named Chloe. She tells Elsie that she's safe now. She's one of them. Elsie is clearly confused and is still waking up. Chloe tells her to relax. The lady keeps them and puts a paw on her. Well, Elsie didn't like that one bit and slaps it away, telling Chloe not to touch her. They walk out into the hallway where there are dozens of cats around, including Lord. Lord. Elsie approaches him and takes the chance to apologize for what she did to him when he was just a kitten. It seems like he's giving her the cold shoulder, then he suddenly turns around and is acting super enthusiastic. It almost comes off fake actually. He tells Elsie how excited he is for her to meet his new family and starts introducing her to several of the cats. He stops to ask her about Patch, but when she starts to explain what happened, he just gets distracted and continues giving her the tour. He talks about how awesome it is here, like a paradise. The lady pets, brushes, and feeds them and never makes them take a bath. As they walk through the house, we can see that it's pretty disgusting. Definitely a contender for the show Hoarders, and there are puddles and muck all over the ground. That's because, as Lord puts it, the whole house is a litter box. Total freedom. Elsie hears some noises coming from the basement door and realizes that there are cats trapped down there. Lord says this is where the cats go when they misbehave. That doesn't sound like freedom to Elsie. Is the lady gonna throw them in there too eventually? Gigi shows up and tells Elsie to calm down and not make too much noise. The lady here has rules. She found a safe place in a closet for her and the babies. Elsie has a bad feeling about this place and Gigi agrees. As they speak, the old woman shows up. Even without seeing her face, this lady is really creepy. She asks Gigi where her sweet little babies are, and the other cats around just repeat the phrase, "The lady keeps us," like a cult or something. Elsie runs to the closet to protect her kittens, and the old woman follows her. She says she just wants to pet the little guys, but when she reaches her hand out, Gigi goes mom mode and scratches her hand. The woman pulls her hand back and says, "Oh, you still have your claws. We can take care of those. We ought to put you with the cranky cats." The woman gets distracted all of a sudden and walks over to the kitchen to feed all the cats, and they follow behind her saying, "The lady feeds us." I don't know why, but this whole scenario is giving me Little Nightmare vibes. Elsie checks in with Gigi, who warns her not to get involved with this group. Something is very wrong here. Elsie asks if she can hide with her, and Gigi straight up says no way. She goes further by saying Elsie's energy is so stressful right now and she needs to keep her kids relaxed. Elsie walks back to the kitchen where the woman is just dumping cat food on the floor for the cats to chow on. We get a disgusting close-up of the cats eating and the old woman's bare feet standing in the slop. Pretty gross. Elsie just wanders through the house looking for a place to chill, but it's hard to find a spot that's not taken by another cat, or that hasn't been marked. She finds an old couch and thinks maybe she could claim a spot underneath it. But when she pulls up the couch skirt, she finds something utterly disturbing. The remains of a dead cat covered in hundreds of maggots. It's mostly skeleton at this point, but there's a pool of blood beneath it and scraps of flesh hanging off. Holy hell. Elsie panics and yells for Lord and the others. She tells them about the rotting cat under the couch, and Chloe is just super casual about the whole thing, saying, "You know what? I bet that's Emma. I wondered where she'd been." She says, "It's fine. The lady keeps us even when we're gone." Elsie puts on a mean face and says, "Stop acting so calm, you creepy bitch. It's not safe here." Okay, that really made me laugh. Lord steps in and says that she's embarrassing him in front of his family. The lady keeps them. They don't throw family in the trash and they don't leave family out in the woods. That last part felt a little pointed. He assures her that everything is going to be alright, but Elsie warns him again that they need to leave. Both her and Gigi can sense that something is wrong. Lord doesn't know what to say at first, then finally responds, "The lady keeps us," and walks away. The other cats repeat the phrase as well, and they leave. Elsie warns them that they're all gonna end up like Emma, bones under the lady's furniture, locked in here till they die. Lord tells her that they can leave whenever they want, they just choose to stay. The lady keeps them with love. You know, typical cult mentality. Elsie is fed up with this talk about the lady. If she was so great, why'd she lock all those cats up? She walks to the door where they're being held and tries to communicate with them, but only gets stilted sentence fragments back. She tells them she's gonna get them out of here, and then they'll all escape. She yells out for Gigi to get the kids ready, and if you remember, Elsie actually knows how to open a door. She climbs up onto some boxes and starts pawing at the door handle. Just as Gigi shows up, Elsie manages to get the door open. We see that the room is full of infected cats, and they're hungry. Chapter 9, Puncture Wounds. Gigi, Elsie, and the kittens watch in horror as the bad kind flood the house, attacking every other cat in sight. It's a 2-page spread of bloody chaos. There's so much disturbing imagery, it's like a Where's Waldo page full of cat gore. There's several cats whose ribs are bulging out of their chest, and if you look in the corner, you can see one cat's head was ripped clean off. It is brutal, and it's clear that the bad kind is winning this fight. Even more disturbing, the cat lady comes in with a broom yelling, "Bad kitties," and attempting to sweep up the piles of guts on the floor. Several cats, including Chloe, circle around her, repeating their favorite phrase, "The lady keeps us." Man, this creepy ass old lady with a bloody broom, it's just so unsettling. Elsie is rattling off apologies to Gigi for opening the door and keeps trying to defend herself, but Gigi doesn't really give a shit at this point. She just says they need to find a way out now. In the other room, Lord is fighting off a bad cat in order to defend Chloe, and the cat lady starts yelling at them. Right before he gets his face scratched off, Elsie comes in and grabs him, dragging him to safety. She sets him down, and Lord says he's not leaving Chloe alone. But before he can do anything else, the cat lady leans down to pick him up, saying, "There's my bad kitty." We finally see her face, and holy shit, she is an absolute horror show. It's easily the most outright scary image so far in this comic. She looks like a deadite from Evil Dead or something, and her eyes are glowing red, implying that she might have contracted the infection as well. She picks up Elsie too. I guess she thinks they were fighting and needs to punish them. She opens the basement door and chucks the two cats down the stairs. Chloe comes up behind her saying, "Do not despair, the lady's punishment is always just. If you survive the downstairs, you will feel peace. The lady knows what's best." As she speaks, however, the cat lady walks out of the basement and slams the door shut, locking Chloe in as well. I have to say, it's satisfying watching her panic after that little spiel she went on. She thinks there must be some reason the lady left her here, since the lady keeps them. Lord agrees, suggesting she's only hiding them from the bad kind since the lady keeps them safe. Elsie is so sick of the cult talk and tries to tell them that the lady is bad kind too. Chloe isn't having it, saying she knows nothing of the lady. The lady loves them and cares for them. Elsie replies that normal cats don't worship their people like this. They ignore them until they need something. They get pretty close to fighting when Lord tells them both to stop yelling. He thinks he found a way out through the cellar door in the back. Elsie says they can't leave without Gigi and the kids. Just then, the basement door opens up again and the old lady appears, saying "bad kitties" and holding a bag. Chloe starts running up to her gleefully, and Elsie tries to stop her, telling her that the lady is not what she thinks. Then we see what's in the bag the lady is holding. Ash, Eleanor, and Milo, the three kittens wondering where their mom is. Milo says that if a stranger ever tries to touch them, his mother told him what to do. He jumps out of the bag and bites the cat lady on the thumb. The little guy then crawls all up and down her legs trying to scratch her. It would be adorable if the situation wasn't so dark. The lady manages to snatch Milo in her hand, and at the same time, Gigi comes up behind her screaming, "Get your goddamn paws off," and slashing the old woman's heel. Oof, that looks painful as all hell. Unfortunately, this throws the lady off balance and sends her sailing down the stairs head first, along with all three kittens. It's almost like slow motion as the woman tumbles down the steps and the kittens fly through the air. Gigi and Elsie jump in, grabbing Eleanor and Ash, and the lady's body almost falls right on top of Chloe, but Lord grabs her by the scruff and drags her out of the way. Problem is, there's still one cat missing, Milo. After a moment of panic, they hear his tiny voice cry out from above. I guess he landed on top of the basement light. Okay, well, that's a sigh of relief, but there's a bigger problem. The old lady's body has fallen in front of the door leading to the way out. They're trapped down here. The chapter ends with the definition of the word toxoplasmosis, a parasite that infects felines and rodents and can be passed to humans through contact with cat feces. It's associated with a variety of neuropsychiatric and behavioral conditions, including a strong attachment to cats, as well as irritability, recklessness, confusion, and slowed reaction times. Right, so I guess the lady contracted this from stepping barefoot and all that cat shit. Ugh, I'm still really grossed out. Chapter 10, Starvation. We see the house sitting dark and eerie in the woods, and the words 2 days later. From under the basement door, we can hear the kittens' voices ring out about how hungry they are and how their tummy hurts. After a couple of days, they're all on the brink of starvation and have had no luck trying to move the cat lady's body from blocking the door. Meanwhile, Lord and Chloe have been trying their damnedest to get the basement door open at the top of the stairs. Gigi and the kittens try again to push the lady's body, while Elsie just stands there encouraging them. How come she's not helping? Gigi is clearly exhausted and starts to chew Elsie out, saying she doesn't know anything and that her instincts are flawed. She points out how Elsie didn't even know about Patch, and goes even further by bringing up what she did to Lord. She even states that Jonas is dead because of Elsie, and caps it all off by saying that everything is always her fault. Clearly, the hunger is getting to Gigi, not to mention watching her own three kittens starve. Gigi says that she can't let Elsie put her kids in danger anymore. She no longer gets to make decisions for the group. Elsie asks her what they're supposed to do next then, and Gigi shockingly declares that they must eat the cat lady. Wow, this is even darker than I thought. Seeing the old lady lying there in her underwear is already upsetting, but the prospect of eating her is... yikes. Chloe protests the idea, stating that the lady keeps them, but Gigi says they don't really have any other options. Her children are starving. Chloe argues some more, but Lord stops her, saying that this is how the lady will continue to keep them. Then he takes a bite out of her flesh. After munching for a moment, he tells them that it's not bad, she doesn't really taste like anything, and the rest of the cats join in. I really didn't expect this comic to get so sick. They all chow down, taking small bites from the woman's flesh in turn, and then, in a truly terrifying twist, the woman wakes up. Yeah, I guess she wasn't dead, but just unconscious. This image of her getting to her knees rivals our introduction to her as being the creepiest damn thing you've ever seen. Her mouth is dripping a greenish bile, and her legs have small chunks bitten out of them by the cats. It's utterly revolting. She stands to her feet, and that psycho Chloe is elated, shouting, "The lady has risen, the lady has risen." Great, now this cult has a resurrection story as well. The woman reaches out for them, but loses her footing and bashes her face on the wall. They all watch in horror as she stumbles around with blood gushing from her head, just saying "bad kitties" on repeat. Gigi looks at Elsie and says, "I take it back, you're the leader again." At that moment, the old hag grabs Elsie by the neck and puts a cone on her, saying, "Bad kitties get the cone." She then throws her in a kennel and follows suit, throwing the rest of the cats in a separate kennel. She makes her way upstairs with the cats and stumbles out of the basement. The rest of the house is a complete bloodbath. Guts and gore litter every inch of the floors, and Gigi tells the kids to close their eyes. It's a good thing because there are actual cat body parts laying around as well. It is a gnarly sight, and by far the goriest thing we've seen in both Stray Dogs and Feral so far. The old woman walks outside and heads towards her car. She mumbles to herself about how ungrateful the cats are, loading them up and slamming the car door before driving off. She makes her way down the winding mountain road, telling them that bad kitties go to animal control. It then cuts to a familiar looking silhouette running through the grass. Back on the road, a massive truck nearly runs the old lady's car off the road, but she narrowly avoids it. Again, we see the figure running through the grass as the woman struggles to turn her headlights on for the first time in the drive. She turns them on just in time to avoid driving directly into the side of the mountain, and the cats are in a full panic, having no idea what's going on or where she's taking them. She rounds the bend only to see a very disturbed looking Patch standing in the road. The woman swerves, and echoing the events of chapter 1, the car goes flying off the cliff and flipping upside down in the air. Out from inside the smoking car, we just hear Elsie crying out Patch's name in disbelief. That is the end of the cat lady arc of Feral. Definitely way more disturbing than the first arc, and honestly one of the most unsettling sections of a comic I've read recently. It somehow gets even darker as the story moves forward, so let me know if you want me to cover the third and most recent arc, 9 Lives, and we'll continue on this twisted feline journey. Shout out to Kill Me Katie as always for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now. If you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email me a submission to the address below with a name or social media handle, but I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grease speaking. Goodbye, friends.
You win some, you lose some, and no one can tell you why. So you go home again, you lick your wounds and say goodbye. You know you've messed things up this time, so you go home.
In a world full of ravenous zombies, rabid animals, it's hard to find a moment of refuge, let alone a permanent safe haven. After their terrifying run-in with the cat lady, Elsie and the gang may have found just that. Pet City, an animal superstore full of all the food, toys, and soft beds they could ever want. They may have found more than they bargained for, however, when they discovered that Pet City already has inhabitants, and there's something not quite right here. Many of the cats are pregnant, but there are no kittens around. The wet food tastes a little funny, and the meal prep room is off limits and guarded. Is this finally a place to call home, or is something sinister going on behind that door? This is a story that does not let up and only gets more disturbing as it goes. This is Feral. Hello friends, this is Grief speaking, and today I'm covering more Feral, the disturbing cat-focused horror comic from the creator of Stray Dogs and featuring the same unassuming art style. If you happen to miss part 1 and 2, you can check them out in the links below, but this is actually a good place for new readers to start as it's a fresh arc and the story and characters are easy to get into here. These are actually the most recently released issues of Feral, so this will be my last video covering the series for a little while at least. Big shout out to the writer and artists of Feral, Tony Fleeks, Trish Forstner, and Tone Rodriguez. They are phenomenal creative people, and you can support them by picking up the recently released paperback copy of Feral 9 Lives at your local comic book shop or bookstore. And finally, if you like what I do here on the main channel, consider checking out my second channel, Grief Speaks. I just uploaded an office tour video where I go through my bookshelf backdrop and some of the weird things I've collected over the years. I'll put a link below, but we have a lot to get to today, so without further ado, this is Feral 9 Lives Explained. Chapter 11. This issue starts right where we left off, the cat lady's car upside down and smashed. We can even see the old woman's body smeared across the pavement on the driver's side, and several rabid animals moving in on the crash site. Elsie cries out for the others and quickly finds Gigi, who is not in great shape. She's missing an eye and has a gnarly cut across her face. Luckily, the 3 kittens are okay, although they're understandably freaked out by their mother's face. Shortly after, they find Lord and Chloe as well in one of the broken crates. They start to make a plan when one of the kittens, Ash, says that there's bad kind outside, and we can see a zombie raccoon and fox peeking through the windshield. Although this is not what caught her attention. She says there's big bad kind. The other infected animals go running, and behind them approaches a hulking monstrosity, an infected grizzly bear that's bigger than the car. It's frightening to say the least. Before they can get a plan of escape together, the bear starts clawing at the car trying to get in at them. As the beast continues to strike the car, it inadvertently pushes it off the edge of the cliff, sending the frightened cats falling to the forest below. There's a great panel here as they flail in the air, looking through the broken back window of the car to see the menacing figure of the bear watching them fall. They crash to the ground, this time right side up, and surprisingly it seems like everyone is still okay. Thank God for the nimbleness of cats. They do a quick head count and weirdly find another cat in the car, a blue cat named Ghost that doesn't speak. Chloe and Lord recognize him from the cat house, and I guess he was in the back of one of the crates, but in the craziness they didn't notice him. We learn that the reason he doesn't speak is that he was born deaf. An interesting note on Ghost is that he was originally supposed to show up in the cat lady arc, and you can even see him on the last page of chapter 7. Anyway, Lord spots none other than Patch standing nearby outside of the car. He calls out to him and Patch turns his head. At this point he's looking worse than ever, almost like a demonic cat creature or something. The ever so naive Lord runs up to him and doesn't understand why he's not responding. Elsie tries to warn him and tears well up in Lord's eyes when he sees how bad Patch looks. Sadly, Patch doesn't even attack, but stares at them for a moment. He is honestly one of the most tragic parts of this whole comic. Just then, the massive bear lets out a bone-rattling roar and starts making his way down the cliffside. They need to run, but Lord tries in vain to snap Patch out of it. The bear closes in and Patch turns to look at it, baring his teeth. This badass zombie cat is going to try and fight the beast, maybe subconsciously to defend his friends. Gigi is done waiting on Elsie and Lord and tells her kids to climb the trees and run. Finally, Patch lunges at the bear, clawing his face up. Here you can see just how big the size difference is, as Patch's entire body can fit on the bear's face. Lord just can't leave Patch behind and keeps trying to get him to come with them. Meanwhile, Patch is doing his damnedest, taking chunks out of the bear wherever he can. Finally, Lord comes to grips with the situation, and him and Elsie run away with tears in their eyes. Behind them, the great bear finally gets his paws on Patch, bringing him up into the air and with a sickening crunch slamming him to the ground. Well, rest in peace, Patch. At the end of the day, he went out pretty valiantly, considering he was a bad kind, sacrificing himself for his friends. Elsie and Lord spot the other cats up in the trees, but before they make it there themselves, a big-ass Rottweiler comes barking out of nowhere and chasing them. Elsie starts climbing the tree, but Lord doesn't quite make it, and turns around to face the dog, hissing at him. It seems like this could be the end, but a voice calls out from nearby, immediately stopping the dog and calling him away. Here we're introduced to an orange tabby cat named Lucky, and it looks like the dog is his friend Mush. Chapter 12. With the sounds of barks echoing behind them, we see the 3 kittens running for their lives. The Rottweiler is chasing them through the woods. Ghost jumps in ready to defend them, and then we see the truth. The kittens are just playing with the big dog, and it's actually adorable. Gigi warns them not to play too rough with Mush and apologizes to Lucky for them being so rowdy. Lucky says it's fine, and more importantly asks Gigi how she's doing. She admits she can't even feel the injured side of her face. She asks Lucky how he can speak to Mush, and he explains that he raised the dog since he was a puppy. They look out onto the nearby town, and here we see Pet City, a superstore surrounded by rabbit cats and dogs. Lucky tells her there's beds, toys, treats, and most importantly, plenty of food. Best of all, if they could get inside, they'd have it all to themselves and be away from the bad kind. Lord overhears the conversation and asks how they would even get close to the place with all the infected around. Here, Lucky introduces himself properly to Lord. He's a bigger cat and comes off pretty intimidating. He tells them that if they work together, they'll think of a way. He then asks them about Elsie, who's sitting up in a nearby tree by herself. Chloe says they should leave her alone. She's processing a lot of trauma. But Gigi says that what she's really processing is guilt. She goes even further, saying they should leave her and her bad instincts behind. She points at her missing eye as an example of Elsie's bad decision making, but in the middle of a rant realizes she doesn't hear her kittens. Lucky calls out to Mush, and we hear the dog bark back, apparently signaling that they're all okay. Gigi doesn't know why, but can't help but trust Lucky. In the woods, we see Ghost, Mush, and the kittens playing, and emerging from the bushes nearby, some rabid animals watch them. Mush picks up on their scent, but at this point the animals are ready to feast, and there are at least 5 of them. Back with the other cats, Lucky says he's studied Pet City for a while, and nobody ever comes in or out. The doors never open. If a cat could get in there, they would have it all to themselves. Problem is, it's surrounded by creepers, the walls are smooth and unclimbable, and there aren't any windows or crawl spaces low to the ground. Chloe mentions that the cat lady would have been able to get them in there. She used to take them there all the time. She then repeats the cult-like phrase, "The lady keeps us." Gigi points out the fact that the lady is dead. She almost killed them crashing her car and is currently smeared across the pavement up on the road. But I guess Chloe isn't as crazy as she seems and says that she just means that a lady could get them in there. Maybe not the cat lady, but some other human. Gigi says they can't trust people anymore and need to take care of themselves. She then rattles off a list of things people did to them, chasing them out of their homes, shooting at them, killing some of them, and trapping them in cages. However, Chloe thinks that it's nice to be cared for, and the lady did care for them. Gigi is pissed at Chloe's defense of the cat lady and starts screaming at her that the lady threw her kittens down the stairs. Although, if you really remember, it was technically Gigi's fault because she cut the cat lady's ankle, which sent her falling down the stairs. Either way, Chloe says that's because the kittens were being bad, and Gigi almost loses it. Meanwhile, in the deeper woods, the rabid animals move in on the kittens, but Mush stops an infected fox in its tracks by biting its neck and ripping its freaking head off. As the blood falls, the kittens are all smiles, impressed by their new friend. The other bad kind are less quick to attack now, but before we see what happens, it cuts back to the others. Lord climbs up to talk to Elsie, telling her how tense it's getting between the others. She's quiet, but Lord continues the conversation alone, telling her how much he misses Patch and thinks about how much he must have suffered these past few weeks. With tears in her eyes, Elsie finally speaks, saying she should have listened to Patch at the beginning and stayed put by the truck after they first crashed. Maybe if they stayed, Patch wouldn't have gotten sick and none of this would have happened. She's just sick of always running and constantly being in crisis mode, missing the days when they were home with people and she could just be safe and alone. She sympathizes with Lord and Chloe. It must have been nice to feel safe and cared for while it lasted. Lord says that whatever it is they're looking for, they're not going to find it by sitting around watching the birds. Down below, Mush, Ghost, and the kittens come back, and they're covered in blood. Gigi freaks out at the sight of her blood-soaked babies, but they say it's okay. It's not their blood anyway. They start to explain everything that happened, and at the same time, Elsie watches the roof of Pet City where she notices an opening. After looking at the nearby power lines, she gets an idea. She leaps down to the others and tells them that she knows how they're gonna get inside. Chapter 13. This issue starts off with Gigi freaking the hell out and proclaiming that they're all gonna die. She believes that they all have the infection and are eventually gonna turn. She can't handle the anxiety of waiting for her and her kittens to become bad kind. Elsie thinks that Gigi is only acting this way because Elsie was the one who came up with the idea, but it seems that Gigi is genuinely terrified. Lucky tells her it's all cool, no one is bitten, but she thinks that the kittens have gotten it just from the blood on them. They've even licked some of it while cleaning themselves, and she reminds them that they also also ate some of the cat lady, and then she runs away in a panic. Lucky just looks back at the others like, "You guys ate a lady?" Chloe's quick to say she never did, and Lord explains the situation they were in. Lucky catches up with Gigi and tries to calm her down, telling her it's fine. He doesn't think you can catch the virus that way. He has good evidence to support it, since Mush eats the bad kind all the time and is perfectly fine. We can actually see him chowing down on one as they speak. Lucky says he would eat anything he can get his hands on out here to survive, and realizes that Gigi is a survivor too, considering she ate a lady, which he says is hardcore. Gigi is visibly calmed by his words. It's clear that Lucky has an incredibly charming demeanor and has at least a 15 in charisma on his character sheet. They head back to the others and Elsie breaks down her plan. She says there's a way in on the roof and believes that they could access it if they climbed one of the telephone poles and crossed the wires hanging above. The others are still skeptical. It's pretty high up, and unlike the trees, there's no grass to fall on below, but instead hard concrete. Lord asks, what about the bad kind everywhere? It's a good question, and to be honest, Elsie is actually worried about what they may find inside, but Lucky assures her that it's safe, making the point that these brain-dead droolers aren't cooking up any plans to get inside. Either way, they need to figure out how to get past the ones that are outside. Gigi wonders if the kittens are actually going to be able to make the climb, and so they plan on carrying them. Elsie, Gigi, and Lucky will all take one. Another issue is Lord. Since he's been declawed, climbing is going to be difficult, but with Chloe helping him, he thinks he can do it. Gigi interrupts the plan again, complaining about how dangerous this is, saying every time they do anything, it goes wrong. Honestly, I'm getting kind of sick of her attitude. Well, Lucky says it's going to be different this time because they have him. You can see Lord roll his eyes like, who is this guy? They're also worried about Ghost. He can't hear, so how will he know what to do, and what if it impairs his balance? Hopefully he'll be able to follow their lead. Elsie's still wearing the cone that the cat lady put on her, and Lucky uses his claw to cut it off. It's clear that along with Gigi, Elsie is quite smitten with this tabby cat as well, saying, how did they ever get so lucky? Gross. So the plan goes into effect. They decide to use Mush as a decoy for the bad kind, since they're actually afraid of the big dog. While he distracts them, the rest of the crew makes their way to the pole. They all manage to climb it, including Lord, who has the most difficult time. They all make it to the top of the pole and begin to cross the wire. Funny enough, Ghost, who they were worried about, easily makes his way across to the other side. Lord is having a much more difficult time and is having trouble balancing. Things get worse when a storm comes overhead and it begins to rain. He cowers on the wire and cries out for Elsie's help. Below, the bad kind are all looking up at them, waiting to feast on anyone who falls. And with the wire now wet, Lord slips off. Elsie reaches out and grabs him just in time, and Gigi is pissed, asking where her kitten Eleanor is. With her focus on Lord, the little kitten was left on the wire alone and starts making her way across to her mom. Lord manages to climb back up and they all move forward. Although Eleanor is moving pretty quickly, happy to prove to her mom that she can do it herself. Gigi, Lucky, and the other two kittens have made it across now. Unfortunately, Eleanor's quick movements are shaking the wire, and at the same time, lightning strikes nearby, sending Elsie falling to her doom. At this point, she was just close enough to the building that Gigi is able to grab her with her claws and pull her up. Elsie is so relieved she begins rambling off apologies and thanking Gigi for saving her life, but Gigi just ignores her and moves forward to check on her kids. The tension between these cats is getting thick. I guess you could say they're acting catty. They all make their way down through the open Pet City skylight and onto some high shelves below. They are immediately greeted with tons of food, treats, and toys. It seems like Lucky was right, and this is the paradise they were hoping for. They start making a plan to gather up some food and blankets to get warm, and Lucky starts to look around for a way to get Mush inside. However, they're all interrupted at the sight of several cats. They don't look like they're infected, but they have a sinister look either way, and their eyes are green. Elsie asks them how they got here. Did they also come through the roof? One of the cats, presumably the leader, responds that they have always been here. And that wraps up chapter 13. On to chapter 14. The cat speaking to the gang is named Nico, and he seems like an authority figure of sorts. He refers to outside of Pet City as the out there, like it's space or something, and calls Elsie and the crew outsiders. He wonders how they descended from the sky like birds. Lucky asks who these cats are and where they came from, and Nico says they don't come from anywhere. They were born here and they will die here. We learn that Nico refers to himself as the ruler. He literally keeps the rules, but another cat named Mother Helena is really in charge. He even calls her the beginning and the end. He says that everyone has a purpose here and urges the outsiders to follow him. Lord is shocked that they've never been outside. Nico tells him that sometimes cats from the out there would come for cleaning or medicine, but none have come for many closings. The fact that these cats only know life in the store means they refer to night as closing, which I thought was a funny detail. As they walk, the kittens find that some of the Pet City cats are staring at them, but Gigi tells them to just keep walking. Nico says that there are lounging areas throughout Pet City, and if they find an empty place, they can keep it. He shows them their gathering place, the cleaning room, where food is prepped, and the medicine room for relaxation. They also keep the litter room far away from everything else so it doesn't smell. This place doesn't sound half bad. He says again that everyone has a purpose here, and those who fulfill their purpose are welcome to everything Pet City has to offer. He points out several cats and details their purpose, like a gatherer, a food bringer, a cleaner, and the discipliners. I should note that many of the cats here are pretty fat, probably due to the fact that they have unlimited food. Nico tells them that soon Mother Helena will give them their purpose as well, once they've shown their value. Lucky cuts in, telling him they need to open the door and let Mush in, but Nico says that this is forbidden. Lucky tells him he's worried about his friends, since there are bad kind all over out there, but Nico doesn't seem to know what he's talking about, which makes sense actually. If they've never left here, why would they know about the rabies outbreak? There's a bit of a commotion when Gigi yells at some of the Pet City cats to back off. For some reason they seem fascinated by the kittens and won't stop staring at them, getting a little too close. They're acting like they've never seen kittens before, and one of them says, "We haven't seen any like this." What the hell is that supposed to mean? Gigi says of course they have and points out that half the cats in here seem pregnant. Lucky gets her to calm down and Nico tells them to get some rest before feeding time. They'll want to be at their best for Mother Helena. Elsie and the gang regroup a bit and she doesn't really know how to feel about this place. After the cat lady's house, she's extra suspicious of weird ass cats. Gigi says it does feel weird, but they haven't found anywhere else as secure and stocked. She says that if Elsie is really worried about it being like the cat lady's house, then she shouldn't open any doors, referring of course to Elsie letting loose the bad kind at the lady's house, which caused a massacre. Lucky tells them both to just be cool. They can see where this all goes and in the meantime relax. Lord is just hyped to explore the place and check out all the toys. The kittens want to go as well, but Gigi's worried. However, Lucky convinces her they'll be fine and to let him go with Lord. As the other cats start to leave, Lucky takes Gigi into a nearby room. She still doesn't understand how he has the ability to make her feel calm, and before you know it, they start making out. It's kind of funny seeing cats kiss like humans. Outside the room, the other cats hear some weird ass purring noises coming from inside, and Lord tells the kids to come with him and Chloe to explore. Elsie starts telling Lord maybe they should try to get a better handle on the place first, and he cuts her off, telling her not to tell him what to do. Later, everyone meets up for dinner. The cats all sit in a big circle with piles of food in front of them, and there are several spots left for Elsie's gang. They have a mixture of wet and dry food, although the wet food is not looking very appetizing. Elsie is shocked and wonders how they managed to get the cans open. Eleanor moves in to take a bite, but Nico tells them to stop. No one eats before Mother Helena. Speaking of which, a huge cat comes walking out, followed by a ton of fresh baby kittens. She eats some of her food and then plops onto her side, allowing the kittens to drink from her. Nico points out Elsie and the others to Mother Helena, but she just ignores him and instead asks about the food, saying that the balance isn't quite right. Lord agrees and says that the wet food is gross, suggesting maybe it's gone bad. He says he's gonna grab some kibble without the wet food, and typical Lord just starts walking to the meal prep room without asking anybody. Nico yells at him to stop, saying this is not his purpose. A big gray cat walks out and tells Lord to just wait, and that the meal prepper, Axel, will prepare a new serving for him. Lord says it's no big deal, he can just eat from the source, and tries to walk in again. Nico then calls the discipliners, who quickly surround Lord. Nico tells him he was warned twice and that there is no third warning. Any cat that stands alone outside of purpose will be subject to swift and final discipline. He asks Lord if he stands alone and the others if any cat will stand with him. Obviously, Lord is really confused. What does he mean final discipline? Lucky then speaks up saying he will stand with Lord. It seems that two cats standing together can spare someone from a final discipline, but this still has consequences. Nico says that Lucky and Lord will not be allowed food for 2 closings. Lord is pissed off, exclaiming how it's not fair and walks away. way. Elsie thanks Lucky for looking out for Lord and feels like she should have been the one to do it. Lucky seems a little annoyed and tells her that she needs to get him under control fast or he's gonna blow this whole thing for them. So Elsie catches up to Lord to talk with him. She tells him he needs to take it easy. This could finally be a permanent home for them that's safe and they can't afford to make these cats angry. She just blatantly tells him not to screw this up for them. He's baffled she would say this. He had a permanent home before she dragged him into the woods and threw him away. And when he found another permanent home where a crazy old lady took care of him, she showed up and in less than a week turned the place into a massacre. He says he's not the screw up here, Elsie is. Everybody loves having him around. She's the one who's gonna mess it all up because it's what she always does. God damn, those are some harsh words. He walks away and leaves Elsie speechless. Lucky shows up and tells her she needs to stay alert. She feels bad that he's banned from eating, but he shrugs it off, saying he'll just grab some food off one of the shelves after he figures out a way to get mush inside. Elsie says that the rule maker made it clear that he can't have food for 2 days, but Lucky doesn't seem to care, pointing out that Nico also said he's got to leave his friend outside in the rain with monsters. He thinks that Elsie's got it all wrong. They need to quit acting like these cats are wise old kings. In reality, they're creepy shut-ins. He didn't almost die getting in here just to have these fat losers tell him what to do. They don't know how to hunt or be hungry, and they wouldn't last a second outside with the creepers. They just need to make the pet city cats think they're in charge. Say whatever they need to hear to keep them on their ass, and the minute an opportunity arises, the second you see what you want, you take it. Doing just that, Lucky kisses Elsie as the rabid cats watch from outside the glass doors. Wow, Lucky is a literal tomcat. And this love triangle cannot have good results. Chapter 15. On a clear morning outside Pet City, the wild rabbit animals continue to roam, and Mush is still doing alright for himself. He pounces on a small dog and tears it to pieces, scaring the hell out of the other critters nearby. Inside, Lord watches through the window, actually jealous of Mush since he hasn't eaten due to his discipline by Nico. Elsewhere, Lucky and Elsie are cozied up after a night of nookie, I guess. Suddenly, a crazy sound rings out, and we see a Pet City cat with tears in her eyes screaming out in pain. Elsie freaks for a moment, assuming that the bad kind got in somehow, but Lucky tells her it's clearly someone giving birth, and if she plays her cards right, that could be them one day. That's creepy. Elsie sends Lucky on his way and tells him to be sneaky about it. Clearly they don't want Gigi finding out. Of course, Lucky, that sly son of a bitch, actually seeks Gigi out and pretends he couldn't find her and then starts flirting with her. The three kittens are looking at the store fish tanks and are trying to spot a fish, but they find they are completely devoid of aquatic life. They wonder what happened when Nico and some of the other cats roll up saying that they ate the fish. Nico says that when the humans abandoned the store, they left piles of food for the animals, but the fish were the first to starve, so they ate them, followed by the birds. A creepy cat comes up right behind the kittens, drooling, saying next they ate the... but he's cut off before we learn what. Gigi shows up and tells the cats to back up once again, and the cat says that they've never seen kittens this big before. What does that even mean? Nico tries to apologize on the cat's behalf, and then Lord shows up complaining that he's starving. He begs Nico to let him eat since it's been 2 days, but Nico says that Lord must wait to eat at dinner. Lord does not like that answer and keeps saying he's hungry, begging for just a small treat. He says he's dying and he can feel his stomach ache and his head hurts. Due to his whining, Nico increases Lord's punishment to 3 closings. Elsie butts in and defends Lord, saying that Nico's rules are arbitrary and they don't take into account situation or circumstance and what they've been through. Lucky hears the commotion and comes in, trying to get Elsie to back down. She then throws him under the bus a little and mentions how he said that these cats are all creepy shut-ins, but Lucky denies saying it. Nico says that due to her insolence, she will not be allowed a meal for 1 closing. This just makes Elsie more defiant, daring him to increase it to 3 days, but Nico only warns her to lower her voice as there are mothers sleeping and tells her there are punishments far more severe than withholding meals. At this point, a crowd of cats has formed around to listen. Elsie starts to leave when someone in the crowd slaps her hard. She just runs away, and Lucky asks the cats which one of them did it. No one fesses up, and Lucky says he's trying to follow the rules, but if they want to get violent, then he can get violent. Meanwhile, Lord's stomach is making unholy noises from hunger, and he sneaks off toward the meal prep area, hoping maybe he can sneak some food. As he makes way toward the doors, a Pet City cat gets his attention from behind a shelf. She says that this place is not safe, especially for outsiders. Although it seems like everything is structured here, Pet City did not come to order peacefully, and that they all have blood on their hands. Lord asks her why she's telling him all this, and she says it's because she still dreams of freedom. But the cats in charge here don't believe in freedom. People used to come here, and sometimes they would rescue cats into the out there. She believes if she keeps her head down, one day people may come again, and she'll have her chance at freedom. But Lord and the other outsiders are not safe because they're not able to follow the rules. She tells him that there is a way out through the front door, but he must find a switch. The large gray cat from before steps out of the meal prep room again and starts questioning the cat, asking what she told Lord. Lord is too hungry to ponder what the cat told him, and with the large cat out of the way, this may be a good chance to sneak into the room. He slowly opens the doors and finds a cat, presumably Axel, covered in blood and ripping something apart on the floor. Elsewhere, Lucky finds Elsie hiding near the registers crying. She says she hates it here. They finally found a place where she can be alone, and there's still no peace. Lucky says this is just the consequence of being part of something. Relationships, family, everyone you get close to can mess you up. He tells her to just let the other cats fend for themselves every once in a while. They're grown-ups after all. He says she needs to put some distance between herself and the other cats, especially Lord, who's a troublemaker. He believes she's stronger than all of them. He moves in on her, biting her neck, and she purrs at the sensation. Wow, who knew these cats would get so horny? The moment is interrupted, however, by none other than Gigi, who's caught them in the act. Lucky tries to convince her that she was just seeing things, but she isn't buying it and gets in Elsie's face. She screams at her, saying she ruins everything and tells her to stay away from her kids. Elsie says that she practically raised the kittens with Gigi, and this sets Gigi off. She slashes Elsie across the face, leaving bloody scratch marks. It is a full-on cat fight, literally. Gigi shows her fangs and hisses and then goes in for another attack, slashing Elsie again. Finally, Elsie starts to fight back and claws at Gigi. The fight is soon interrupted by Lord, who rushes over telling them they need to run and that the Pet City cats are eating babies. Wait, what? Lucky says he must be delirious from hunger, but Nico confirms it himself, saying that they do in fact eat their young. The large cat from earlier is there as well and adds that they eat rule breakers too. He drops the corpse of the cat that spoke to Lord before. Her throat is chewed out. And that is the end of chapter 15 and the 9 Lives arc of Feral. These damn cats can't get a break. So it seems the wet food they've been serving is actually the fresh corpses of the dead. And even more disturbing, it seems that this is primarily made up of small kittens. The reason so many of the female cats in Pet City are pregnant is because they are straight up breeding their meals. Conceptually, it may be the most disturbing thing we've seen so far. Well, I hate to say it, but this is the most recent issue of Feral. We're all caught up, so this is going to be my last video for now while we wait for the next arc to release. What do you guys think will happen next? Let me know in the comments. Shout out to Kill Me Katie as always for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now. And if you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email me a submission to the address below with the name or social media handle. But I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grease speaking. Goodbye, friends.
You win some, you lose some, and no one can tell you why. So you go home again. You lick your wounds and say goodbye. You know you've messed things up this time. So you go home.
Frankie has recently moved back to her hometown, and something is just not right here. Strange security cameras are popping up all over the place and no one knows who's watching. Unseen creatures loom around in the dark. Liminal spaces exist that defy reason, and for the love of God, what is wrong with the kids at the Marble House? This is Stagtown, and there's a dark mystery here connected to the town's oldest attraction, a carousel of galloping deer. Frankie, with the help of her conspiracy theorist neighbor, tries to get to the bottom of it, if she can survive that long. Hello friends, this is Grief speaking, and today we're diving into Stagtown. This is another webtoon comic that came highly recommended in the comments, and you guys did not steer me wrong. Stagtown is a compelling, smart, and eerie comic that I couldn't stop reading. It reminds me a lot of a Junji Ito manga, specifically Uzumaki, in the way that there's a mystery surrounding this town, and each chapter is a different encounter with something supernatural. There's over 100 episodes, but in this video I'm only covering the first 20, which compose the first 4 chapters. It's a great introduction to the series, but let me know in the comments if you'd like me to cover the whole thing. Either way, you should go over to Webtoons and read it yourself if you're interested. Anyway, let's get into this thing. This is Stagtown Explained. The story opens with music playing from an extravagant and beautiful carousel, but something is very wrong. The spinning stags begin to break free of their poles and leap out onto the ground. They stumble in pain as blood pours from their bodies. Here, the poles look as if they've impaled the living animals who fall to the floor. Nearby, a young woman watches all of this horror, the stags writhing around on the ground and one suffering and trapped in webs still on the carousel. This is when we get the title page, and you get a clear idea of what you're in for with this comic. The young woman wakes up from this nightmare sitting in her car at the edge of the road. This is Frankie, our protagonist and narrator. She says that she recently moved back to her home, Stagtown. It's a tiny place in the mountains where nothing really ever changes. She left a few years ago to attend an out-of-state college, but she always knew she'd come back here someday. Chapter 1, Surveillance. I just have to point out how much I love the art on this page. It's disturbing and gorgeous. Frankie lives in a decent apartment on the east side of town, and the rent's pretty reasonable, although some of her neighbors are a bit odd. Like a guy named Jeremy, who's the resident conspiracy theorist. Tinfoil hats, Illuminati, that kind of guy. He spots Frankie in the hall and tells her that new spy cameras have been put up on the property. She assures him he's imagining things, but sure enough, he points out a security camera right behind her that is oddly pointing right at Jeremy's door. She tries to explain it by saying that it looks ancient and has probably been there since they built the place, but Jeremy protests, saying that if anyone would have noticed, he would. He adds that this isn't the only one. He's seen new cameras popping up all over town. Who's on the other side of these cameras, and why are they watching his door? Frankie chalks it all up to conspiracy talk and tells him to try and get some sleep for once. The next day, she makes a cup of coffee and sits down at her kitchen table when she notices something above her. In the corner of her kitchen is a security camera pointed right at her. She's obviously shocked and confused and decides that maintenance must have installed it while she was sleeping. This is a gross invasion of privacy, of course, and she slams her coffee down before marching to the landlord's office. When she exits the building, however, she finds that Jeremy might not be so crazy after all. There are dozens of cameras mounted everywhere, on every wall and pole in sight, and they're all the same out-of-date style. The news claims it's all a big prank or art project, but they're popping up in people's homes as well. And the town's traffic cams had all mysteriously stopped working the night before all of the new cameras were installed. Weirder, the cameras seem almost indestructible, and their cables all lead straight into the ground, through walls, or under boulders. While officials try to solve the issue, they recommend people just ignore the cameras for now, but everyone starts to carry umbrellas with them to hide themselves. Meanwhile, Frankie is forced to put up with the camera in her kitchen until maintenance can come and deal with it. Finally, she can't take it anymore and removes the camera herself, cutting the cord from the wall. Later in the evening, she heads out to run some errands, and when she returns, there's now 3 more cameras in the same spot. Although these are much more menacing looking and have metallic spider-like legs keeping them in place. After this, Frankie eats all of her meals in her bedroom and only orders takeout to avoid entering the kitchen. Everyone soon learns the same lesson. If a camera is taken down, covered up, or blocked, it's replaced overnight. And if you cut the wires, then more, even uglier cameras show up, and every camera cut down is replaced by 2 or 3 more. They're completely still, but those strange metal legs make it look like they could move if they wanted to. And everyone's wondering the same thing. Who's watching on the other side? This whole concept reminds me of a Junji Ito story called The Town Without Streets that I covered in my Junji Ito Explained series. In that story, a girl's family keeps spying on her through holes in the wall, and she eventually ends up in a strange town where everyone spies on each other through thousands of peepholes. Anyway, if you like this concept, you might like that one, but let's get back to the story. Finally, Frankie decides she's gonna stay at a motel out of town until this all blows over. But before she leaves, she feels like she should check on Jeremy the conspiracy theorist since she hasn't seen him in a few days. Unfortunately, it seems he's being watched more closely than anyone. There are now dozens of cameras in the hallway, all pointed at Jeremy's door. Sporting an umbrella to shield her from the watchful cameras, Frankie knocks on Jeremy's door, but doesn't get any response. She does, however, hear the sound of a cat meowing. She tells the landlord about the situation, and rather than being worried, the lady is pissed off about the fact that Jeremy has a cat in his apartment since he doesn't have a pet deposit. She uses the master key to open open his door, and when they enter, they see a pretty disturbing sight. The cat is pinned to the floor by one of the cameras. Frankie pulls the camera off of it, and luckily it wasn't severely harmed. What's really off-putting about this is that it implies the cameras can move after all. Otherwise, how could it get on top of the cat like that? Jeremy's apartment is pretty filthy, and his laptop is left open and on a website called Bigalope.com with text that reads the truth about Bigalope. This is an actual website you can visit, but we'll touch on that later as it has to do with the ARG attached to this comic. The weird thing about Jeremy's apartment is that there's surprisingly no other cameras inside it, just the one that pinned the cat down. There's also a large cardboard box sitting on the floor with mirrors taped all over it. They go ahead and open it and find a malnourished and dehydrated Jeremy inside along with 6 cameras watching him. They get him to a hospital, and later he tells Frankie what happened to him. I guess he couldn't handle all the cameras watching him, so he made the box and hid inside. After a while, he lost all of his strength and couldn't crawl back out. The cameras then made their way inside. He says that when he was at his weakest and everything was going dark, he could hear the cameras talking to him, voices from the other end of the wires. Creepy. Jeremy's always been paranoid, but this business about the voices is freaking Frankie out. She tells him that she plans on getting out of town for a bit and recommends he do the same when he gets released from the hospital. He says he can't wait for that and needs to get out now. Then he asks Frankie to take him with her, and she leaves. She's hesitant but finally agrees. That night they get packed up and start to head out of town, but Frankie is still worried about Jeremy's recovery. He insists that he'll be safer leaving than staying, and so with Jeremy's cat cuddled up on his lap, they hit the road. As they drive through town, they start to notice that many of Stagtown's residents have begun wearing masks. I guess it's easier than carrying an umbrella around and a more efficient way to hide your identity. I hate to reference Junji Ito once again, but the story I mentioned earlier, The Town Without Streets, also features residents wearing masks. This aspect could be a direct inspiration from that comic, or maybe just the natural next step in a society without privacy. A mask might be your last line of defense in concealing your identity. But what would I know about that? Jeremy and Frankie make their way to the tunnel leaving town and find it to be blocked off, with several masked men guarding it. One of the men approaches Frankie and asks her to step out of the car. He says they just need to be sure she doesn't have any cameras with her. Apparently these guys want to stop the spread of what they call an infection outside of the town, so they're gonna search her car. Frankie yells at the guy and says it's not like it's some kind of disease and that she's not gonna be bullied by some half-assed militia. The masked man grabs her and tells his friend to get her keys. Meanwhile, Frankie screams for Jeremy's help. He gets out of the car and the masked men are kind of thrown off by his sickly appearance. At the same time, a camera watches from under the car and suddenly climbs up onto the roof. This is the first time we've actually seen one physically move. Jeremy grabs a nearby metal gas canister and gives the camera a good whack. Unfortunately, gas sprays onto his arms and the damaged camera sparks, lighting Jeremy on fire. It's a pretty scary sight. He falls to the ground, engulfed in the flames, and his eyes seem to be burning out of his skull. Somehow he can still move, and he jumps off the nearby cliffside. We watch as his flaming body falls into the river below. Frankie and the Masked Men look over the edge in shock. You know, Frankie and the Masked Men sounds like a cool band name. But anyway, she breaks down into tears, and upon looking at the broken camera, begins to scream at it, saying this is all their fault. She then realizes that the camera obviously didn't come with them, and crawls out of the woods. Next thing you know, the masked men begin to follow the wire from the camera into the woods, and Frankie, with no real reason other than curiosity, follows along. The camera cable isn't buried in the ground like the others in town, and it seems to go on forever. They finally find that the cable has led them right to an old graveyard, and after more investigation, they see that there are multiple cables throughout the cemetery, and that they do eventually go into the ground, right into the graves. The men begin to dig up the dirt at the protest of Frankie, who's against the idea, but they assure her that they're just gonna dig enough to free the cable. However, after quite a bit of digging, it's revealed that the cable goes right into the coffin itself. After some discussion, no one has the guts to open the casket and find out what's inside, so they all head home. Strangely, the next day, all the cameras in town just stop working. They dry up and drop to the ground like old vines. The police try searching for Jeremy, but aren't able to recover his body. We can see Frankie has adopted Jeremy's cat, and she points out that there's still one camera that remains in town and seems to watch people go by. But it seems harmless and everyone just ignores it. Like the others, the wire goes into the ground and can't be tracked, but some people claim it appears to head toward the river. That is the end of chapter 1, and what an interesting idea. What do you guys guys think is going on with the cameras? I like to think that because the cameras lead to graves, that somehow the dead were the ones watching, obsessed with the world of the living that they left behind. The final camera and its cable leading to the river could mean that this one belongs to Jeremy, who passed over and is now watching the town from wherever his body resides. So let's move into chapter 2, Marble House. Just before the start of summer, Frankie has gotten behind on some bills and needs to earn some extra cash to make ends meet. Having some experience giving piano lessons, she signs up on a local gig app and lists herself as a tutor, but nothing comes for the first few weeks, forcing her to lower her hourly rate quite a bit until finally she gets a request from a foster home on the other side of town. So she jumps at the opportunity and heads over for her first job. Here we get another beautiful title page with a huge and ominous house staring Frankie down. She meets with Miss Davids, the foster mother. She's a sweet old woman, and Frankie finds her doing some patchwork on the side of the house. I guess it's a known historic home in Stagtown called the Marvale House, and it has some major foundational issues, so they're hoping to sell it and move soon. Inside, they chat over tea, and Miss Davids says she thinks piano lessons would be great for the children. She's always trying to find hobbies for them, and right now they're interested in rock polishing, an idea she came up with from the kids mispronouncing the Marvale House as the Marble House. The kids make dozens of marbles from rocks as a hobby. Davids finally calls the kids down to come meet Frankie, but she mentions one last thing. The kids of the Marvale House have some kind of medical issue and must wear masks at all times. They try to make it fun by decorating the masks. Just then, the children come rushing down the stairs, and Frankie gasps at the peculiar sight of the children. All of their masks resemble the heads of different animals, and not like in a cutesy kind of way. They're pretty realistic looking. It's beyond eerie. We jump ahead 2 weeks, and Frankie says she wanted to leave after the first day, but she just really needs the money. And at this point, she's gotten used to the creepy masks. Though she does wonder if this is a home for kids with birth defects or disfigurements, and speculates that the masks may be a way of making them feel safer. Either way, they were really just normal kids. They did their lessons, played outside in the sandbox, finger painted, typical kid stuff. There's an interesting little detail here I only noticed on my second read through, but the light reflection on this kid's mask looks like a man falling. It's very reminiscent of Jeremy's fall into the river. Anyway, everything seems fine despite the masks. That is until the start of the third week. One night, sitting in the TV glow, Frankie hears a knock at her door. However, when she opens it, there's no one in sight. Looking on the ground, she spots a small envelope. She opens it and gasps at what she finds, but we don't get to see what it is. The next day, Frankie is at the Marvale House, claiming that the envelope must have been brought to her by one of the children. Miss Davids is surprisingly calm about the whole thing, even if this would suggest that one of her children walked across town by themselves at night. She says she'll find out who did it and give them a stern lecture, but she's also kind of glad that they did, and mentions how the kids have really taken a liking to Frankie, and that this is just an expression of that. We finally get a look at what was in the envelope, a drawing by one of the kids. The thing is, it's a child's rendition of what happened to Jeremy, almost exactly. The camera, the car, the river, and the flames. Very spooky, and you can see why it's so off-putting to Frankie. A few days later, the lessons resume, and they never found out which kid left the drawing, but Miss David's reaction to it was just really off. Frankie wonders if maybe she's just got a delayed shock or PTSD from the incident, and it might just be a coincidence. While she gives a lesson to the girl in the pig's mask, she notices the girl scratching under her mask. It seems to really be bothering her, and Frankie reluctantly asks if she needs to take it off for a moment. In a tense few panels, the girl begins to untie the pig mask. I should point out that while I'm going straight through this whole chapter, this would have been the end of an episode on Webtoons. So imagine a few years back, before the next episode launched, the anticipation of what was under the mask must have been unbearable. Anyway, she slowly removes the freaky mask, and Frankie is surprised to find a cute little girl underneath with no disfigurements whatsoever. So they continue the piano lesson until the girl seems to have something in her mouth. She suddenly spits out what appears to be a marble. It looks like one of the marbles the kids made polishing rocks. Gross, was that in her mouth the entire time? Worse than that, it seems she's storing more in her cheeks, and Frankie tells her to spit them all out. It's bad for her teeth. The little girl begins spitting several marbles out, and it's a lot more than expected. In fact, it's bizarre bizarre how many are coming out of this girl's mouth. She then convulses and starts puking dozens of balls out as her eyes roll to the back of her head. It's a bewildering and disturbing image. Up close, you can see the girl's mouth widening in an unnatural way as the marbles fill her cheeks. Absolutely terrifying. Frankie finally just screams and runs to find Miss Davids sitting in the living room. She tells her to call the hospital and grabs her shoulder, but this knocks loose the old woman's hat and glasses to reveal that the top of her head is just a massive hole filled with marbles which come flooding out onto the floor. Frankie freaks out and slips on the marbles, hitting her head on the wall and falling to the ground. Then, in possibly the scariest portion of the comic so far, Miss Davids, or whatever this creature is, comes walking towards Frankie. Her flesh is twitching as marbles move under the surface of her skin, and she says, "I've lost my marbles, Frankie." Definitely one of the most disturbing puns of all time. Frankie's a bit woozy but manages to run towards the door. However, this is actually the door to the basement, not the exit, and she opens it only to fall down the basement stairs into the darkness below. When she comes to, she finds that large chunks of the foundation's walls and floors have been dug out, and the children without their masks on are eating the rocks. There's a particularly gnarly close-up of a kid's bloody mouth and broken teeth as he inserts more rocks. Man, it makes my teeth hurt just looking at it. I guess the kids have been using their own mouths as rock tumblers to smooth them out, and they spit them into a huge opening in the floor. Suddenly, a voice cries Frankie's name from the top of the stairs. It's Miss Davids, and her body has changed even more, resembling more of a monster than a human now. We can see her silhouette peeking in from the doorway, her neck and arms elongated. She starts to repeat the phrase, "I lost my marbles," once again. She makes her way towards Frankie, and we see her skinny hand grasp the wall, marbles shifting around under her skin. Ugh. Frankie has no choice but to jump into one of the holes in the floor filled with marbles and makes her way across to an egress window on the other side. She climbs up to it, but finds it's been glued shut. Meanwhile, Miss David's hand reaches out to grab her, and now the skin on her hand is stretching out and popping open, dropping marbles from her flesh. With no other option, Frankie picks up a rock and breaks the window open, climbing to safety but cutting her body up pretty bad in the process. Making it back to her car, she reports the house to the police. Knowing her story would sound made up, she instead makes an anonymous call of child abuse, hopefully getting them to at least investigate the house. A few days later, we see Frankie bruised and bandaged with a dozen band-aids covering her body from all the small cuts. She also has a large cut over her right eye, which actually stays throughout the comic. Kind of an interesting continuity detail. Anyway, Frankie reads the local newspaper and sees that the Marvell house has collapsed due to an undiscovered sinkhole. A gas pipe then broke and the place went up in flames. However, Miss Davids and the children survived and were relocated to another town. Frankie still doesn't know if this has anything to do with Jeremy's death, but she feels she needs to get the hell out of this town, and soon. In the final panel of the chapter, we see just outside Frankie's apartment door, a jar addressed to Frankie is filled with marbles and broken human teeth. One last gift from the Marble House children. That is a chilling image. Chapter 3, Carousel. The chapter begins with Frankie saying she's been doing alright despite the trauma she's endured the last couple months. She's had trouble sleeping though and has relied on sleeping pills. She's also convinced her landlord to let her move to another property of hers on the outskirts of town. She doesn't want the Marble House kids to know where she lives. She's actually got a great setup in a pretty nice building. Her landlord even gave her a big discount on rent because of Jeremy dying. I guess she thought Frankie and Jeremy were dating and it's the least she could do. This obviously isn't true, but Frankie just went along with it to get the discount. We see her throwing a bag into her car and hitting the road along with another gorgeous title page. Frankie's heading to her old apartment building. She can't stop thinking about what happened to Jeremy. He was the first person to notice the cameras. He said he heard voices coming from them, and then the awful Marble House children made that drawing. It's just too strange, and Frankie wants to get to the bottom of it. She tried asking if she could see Jeremy's things in the storage unit they were being kept in, but apparently the police weren't letting anyone touch the stuff until they could track down some relatives. Frankie's got a plan though. She walks into the leasing office with a pink hat rack. Yeah, it's pretty striking since this comic is mostly black and white. She tells the landlord that Jeremy let her borrow it, but it reminds her of him too much. So she thought it was best if it went back with his other belongings. After Frankie leaves, the lady calls a maintenance guy to haul off the rack and store it wherever Jeremy's stuff is. This is of course all part of Frankie's plan as she waits around to follow the guy. There are storage units all over the complex, so she needed to be sure where it was. Eventually the maintenance dude heads into the basement of Unit C, and Frankie's got her location. She waits till after dark and heads into the building, having made a copy of the key before returning hers. Smart move. She enters the storage units, which are basically falling apart, and the lights are on an old switch timer. It's supposed to turn the lights off after a while to save on electricity, but it's been broken and only stays on for 5 minutes. Yeah, you can see where this is going. Anyway, Frankie continues down the hall looking into the barred storage unit until she spots the bright pink rack. Another clever move. As the switch timer ticks, she pulls out some bolt cutters and breaks the lock on Jeremy's unit. Before the timer hits 0, she remembers to crank it again before she starts looking through Jeremy's stuff. She repeats this process for hours as she searches through his things, and so far hasn't found anything of note. That and the fact that she has to get up and turn the timer every 5 minutes is leaving her pretty irritated. Then she finally stumbles upon a black box with a lock on it. She puts it aside to look at later and finds another, smaller box behind it. This one is wrapped up heavily in duct tape and has the number 5 on the front. Curious, Frankie pulls out her pocket knife and begins to cut it open. She loses track of time, however, and the switch timer shuts off while she does so. She gets up to turn it back on and sets the box down, which seems to be emitting a red glow. Well, that's not good. She didn't bring a flashlight and her phone is dead, so she stumbles into the dark looking for the switch when she hears a small scratching noise behind her. She pauses for a minute and doesn't hear it again, so she shrugs it off, finally finding the light and turning it on. When she gets back to the box, she takes a look inside to find dirt. Yep, this is just a box of dirt. As she ponders this, the lights suddenly shut off again. Okay, it definitely hasn't been 5 minutes. Frankie once again bumps around in the dark until she finds the switch. Only this time, it shuts off seconds after she winds it. She then hears the scratching noise again, and it seems to be coming from the dirt box. Frankie hopes it's just a rat, but either way, she's ready to get the hell out of here, except for one thing. Her bag with her keys and ID is sitting on the floor by the unit. After a moment, she comes up with the idea of using her pocket knife to jam the switch, stopping it from prematurely turning off, and it actually seems to work. She dashes back to her belongings, shoving the black lockbox into her bag and pushing the rest of Jeremy's stuff into the unit before rushing back towards the exit. Just as she's reaching the door, the timer forces itself off again and launches the key into the air, whizzing by Frankie, narrowly missing her. She looks back at the knife on the ground, contemplating grabbing it when she hears the scratching noise amplify in the darkness around it. At the horrifying noises, she just says, "You know what? Keep the knife, I'll buy a new one," and slams the door shut as she leaves. I like that this character doesn't fall into typical horror tropes. She's just like, screw it. Still, it was a frightening encounter. What the hell came out of that box? The next day, Frankie starts her attempt at getting into the lockbox. In order to do so, she's gotten a lockpick kit, and it actually opens pretty easy since it was just a basic padlock. My only question is, why not use the bolt cutters that easily broke the storage unit lock, which was much bigger? But I digress. Inside, she finds a pile of papers and a notebook, which would be useful, but it's all in code. Of course, Jeremy would put it in code. She also finds a picture of him and his cat, which visibly bums her out. She looks through the notebook, hoping to find something obvious, and stumbles upon some drawings of hearts with the words Jeremy plus Frankie written all over. I guess the poor guy had a big crush on her. Frankie responds out loud saying, "Ew." She looks over at the cat and starts to defend herself, saying, "Okay, not ew, but it just wouldn't have worked out between us. I mean, I don't know him at all." After a bit of rambling like this, she finally realizes she's explaining herself to a cat and starts looking back through the box. She finds a pin from the 1970 Stagtown Fair and some old photos and clippings. She also finds a pill bottle that contains dirt. Man, what was it with Jeremy and dirt? One of the newspaper clippings features the Stagtown Carousel and its history, so she decides to head over to this historic landmark and check it out. She explains a bit of the history that she can remember, that the carousel was built around 100 years ago at the edge of town, and that Stagtown had a history of building some of the first carousels, but this one was a true beauty and became somewhat of a tourist attraction. There's a funny moment where Frankie points out how weird it was back then to ride a horse to Stagtown just to ride a fake one on a carousel. That's a good point. She questions whether it's really connected to Jeremy or just a random article he found interesting. Either way, she continues onward until she arrives at the location of the carousel. Although, we soon learn that the spot is empty now, just a big field. People still call it the carousel though, even though the actual carousel was torn down decades ago. Frankie has a look around and doesn't find anything but grass and dirt. She remembers the bottle of dirt Jeremy had, and this gives her an idea. She rents a metal detector and comes back, but still finds nothing but some old change and an earring. anything. It was a good attempt, but there's just nothing here. On her drive back to return the metal detector to the hardware store, she decides if she's gonna get anywhere, she needs to think like Jeremy, which isn't easy considering Jeremy thought that the government was controlling the minds of children through subliminal breakfast cereal commercials. Anyway, Jeremy was big into research, so Frankie plans on learning as much as she can about the carousel. She remembered from school that the town's welcome center has a room dedicated to the carousel, so she makes that her next stop. The woman at the town center shows her the room, and right off the bat, there's a giant carousel stag near the front of the room with a pretty creepy look, especially after the haunting nightmare Frankie had in the opening of this comic. Apparently, this wasn't one of the animals you could ride on, but instead sat at the very top of the carousel as a decoration. It's actually the only intact piece of the original attraction. The carousel was more impressive than we thought. Built in the late 1800s, it had 3 stories, and the roof was made of glass, so the riders could watch the stars at night. Frankie asks if the carousel was so great, why was it torn down, but I guess there are no actual records as to why. She then spends some time taking pictures of everything in the room, hoping somewhere there's a clue that will lead back to Jeremy. The woman at the front desk does mention that a young man came in a few months ago researching the carousel as well. It's dark out now, and Frankie drives back out to the field where the carousel stood. Then, in the distance, she sees some black figures standing in the field, but they're hard to make out. She turns on her brights to get a better look and finds it to be a herd of deer, dozens of them, and their eyes are glowing white watching her. The strange glow of their eyes is unsettling to say the least, and in a panic, Frankie drives back to her apartment. She immediately slams down a glass jar, throws some change in, and writes moving fund on it. She says to the cat, when this jar is full, we're leaving. And I don't blame her after that frightening scene. That's the end of that chapter, but there's a short episode here called Remember. There's several episodes like this that take place throughout the series and give us insights into the past of the characters. In this Remember segment, Frankie is checking her mail and complains about the pile of packages by the door, suspecting the postal service was lazy and just dropped everything in the corner for residents to sort out. Jeremy shows up and she asks him how the UFO hunt is going. He seems kind of embarrassed and says he gave up on that months ago. Then he spots the pile of packages and reveals that these are all his. After struggling to carry them all, Frankie insists to let her help, and they head up to his apartment door. It's clear Frankie is a bit more organized than Jeremy. Her stack of packages is neatly stacked, and his is a complete mess. She drops her stack in front of his door and says goodbye, but Jeremy stops her and tries to ask her something, awkwardly fumbling the words until finally just saying never mind. I wonder what he was going to ask. Was it about the strange phenomenon in Stagtown, or was he just going to try and ask her out? After that glimpse of the past, we jump back to the present. Some unseen person is sitting at their computer when they get an email. We can see that it's from Jeremy, and the receiver is someone named Felix, who seems really worried. Next, it seems we're looking into the future, as the word soon appears on the page, along with some really eerie text. It reads, I don't know how long we've been here, but I can hear music. There's a spooky shot of a carousel, only instead of stags, there are horses. The text continues, saying, even after all this time, can you hear it? Vaguely appearing through some dark mist is deer with hollowed out black eyes. Continuing on, it reads, we're almost all together. Nothing gets out. You hear it, don't you? We knew you were one of us. Then we see a beautifully twisted illustration of a disfigured doe, its skin branching out like antlers, and below it a stag covered in massive flies, blood ripping from its eyes, and spiders crawling on its face. It's easily one of the most disturbing images so far. Chapter 4, Under. This may be my favorite chapter so far, just because of how well it displays a very specific type of fear. Frankie is putting her organizational skills to work and has spent days trying to sort through Jeremy's notes. It hasn't gotten her too far. She hasn't had any luck deciphering the code in the journal, but she finally finds a sketch that seems recognizable. An old bridge that had closed down years ago. Finally finding a lead, Frankie heads over to the broken down bridge to search around. She reluctantly gets out of her car to check it out, and we're greeted with another cool chapter page, with the title made up from cracks in the ground. Well, other than some dead birds, there's not much to go on the bridge. She reaches the end and stumbles upon a small footpath leading into the woods. After hesitating for a moment, she walks down the path, declaring that she'll probably regret this. After a bit of a hike, she finds a dilapidated old farmhouse. It seems ancient. Frankie's starting to suspect that this whole thing is a ruse to get her to learn town history, but she says she refuses to learn anything from this situation. Walking around the building, she finds all the entrances are bricked up and sealed off. Finally, she does find a window that's broken in. Inside, nature has really taken over the place, and there's plant life everywhere. Frankie leaves for now and comes back the next day fully prepared. She says she wasn't about to waltz into some mystery building without some essentials. She's got water, snacks, bandages, a knife, a flashlight, headlamp, battery, charger, and some rope. Okay, maybe she overdid it, but like I said before, I love that she's going against the horror trope, and instead of just going in when she first found the building, she went back and did some heavy prep work. I love it. She climbs inside and makes her way through the overgrowth until she finds a little clearing, at the center of which is a trapdoor. It must have been Jeremy who cleared the brush around it, and Frankie says it's hard to picture him doing anything in the woods other than maybe looking for Bigfoot. She opens the trapdoor and finds a ladder leading down into darkness. Well, if Jeremy went down there and came out fine, it should be alright. She can't imagine him having any survival skills after all. She plans on climbing the ladder down halfway to get a look at what's down there, and if it seems safe, she'll go get some gear like a lantern and come back tomorrow to explore it. She also posts a tweet about her location in case she gets hurt, that way people will know where to look. Then she ties a rope to a nearby tree and brings it with her. Wow, she's really doing everything pretty smart here. She makes her way down the ladder, but at about halfway down, one of the rungs breaks beneath her foot and the ladder snaps in half. She starts to fall backwards, but grabs the rope, which immediately snaps. The trapdoor shuts above her and she falls to the ground below. Luckily, Frankie is okay, just some bumps and bruises, and she lights up her headlamp. After shouting for a while, it's clear that no one's gonna hear her down here, and on top of that, she has no cell service. There's no way back up the opening, and she finds herself in a square and empty room underground. The only exit being a small square vent opening on the wall. She did bring food that she could ration out and survive maybe 3 days with, which is a plus. After a while waiting around checking her reception, she finally decides to power her phone down to save battery. Eventually, she decides she's got to see where the vent leads, but before she crawls through, she ties a thread to a nail just outside so that if there are any twists and turns, she can follow it back. Clever. Crawling through the vent isn't easy and pretty tiring, and there seems to be no end to it. The only good thing is that there are no turns, just one long straight tunnel. After who knows how long, Frankie gives up and turns around, slowly respooling the thread as she crawls back. Shortly after changing directions, however, she finds that the thread line is already tight. She looks up to find that the nail is in the vent just a few feet behind her, and that the way she came in is completely shut up. That's right, guys, the claustrophobia is about to get very real. At this point, it's clear that there is a supernatural force in Stagtown. With no other option, she continues down the tunnel the direction she started toward. She continues to check her phone every so often, but has to stop eventually because her battery is near dead. As time goes on, the vent feels as if it's closing in on her, and she begins to feel sick to her stomach. She stops to rest here and there and uses the spare battery she brought to keep her phone and headlamp charged. But in the end, that runs out too. She has no idea how long she's been in the tunnel and has to stop to rest several times. Well, as much rest as you can get in a pitch black tunnel underground. It just keeps going, and at this point her body is in aching pain from crawling so long. She feels like whatever the supernatural force is that's doing this wants her to give up. She can hear faint voices in the darkness somewhere in front of her and behind her as well. It finally becomes completely overwhelming, and Frankie freaks out in a panic, crying for help. There's an amazing page here showing the surface leading underground where Frankie is trapped, her screams echoing through the vents. The author does a stunning job here of showcasing the terror of this situation. I do have to say, the idea of being trapped in a tight space like this is horrifying, and I find myself subconsciously holding my breath while reading this chapter. I hate it, but in the best way. After screaming her lungs out, Frankie breaks down into tears, and we see blood dripping from her battered hands. She gets some band-aids out of her bag and patches them up, then continues forward, convincing herself she just has to keep going. With her headlamp out, she crawls forward in agony in the dark, until finally, she hits a wall. The vent has finally come to an end, and it's blocked off. Like some kind of sick joke. She reaches at the wall and scratches at it. Unlike the solid walls of the vent, this one is actually made of dirt. She starts digging through it, and after a while, some light bleeds through. Finally, an exit. She furiously claws through the dirt and emerges on the other side, collapsing, only to find the nail with the thread right in front of her eyes. She looks up to see on the opposite wall the tunnel that she entered. She's emerged from the other side of the room that she started in. After all that time and suffering, she's gotten nowhere. Frankie just stays laying on the ground in tears. She's hungry, thirsty, tired, and the room is dark. This chapter is absolutely unforgiving. She's finally just completely given up. Clearly no one's coming to find her and she's out of options. Despite her headlamp being dead, she suddenly finds a small illumination in the room. She looks up and sees a glow by the dirt wall that she climbed through. There's a small object that must have been embedded in the wall, a flying saucer keychain that lights up. Frankie instantly recognizes it as Jeremy's keychain. This reminds her that he was here and that he somehow escaped. She tries once again to think like Jeremy would, and if he were here, she thinks he would look for a secret passage. So Frankie begins investigating every inch of the walls in the room, but she finds nothing, leaving her only one more place to look: the vent. She really doesn't want to go back in there, but she doesn't want to die either. She crawls back into the vent, this time knocking on every panel as she does so. Floor, ceiling, wall. I actually really like the illustration here, showing the knocks on each side of the square text. I don't know why, but I find it very satisfying, the sound effects next to each wall that she's knocking on. Anyway, this repeats down the tunnel until finally we hear 3 knocks and a thud. This time, one of the walls sounds hollow. She presses into it, and sure enough, it opens. A secret passage. Frankie bursts into tears and laughter as she spots a marking on the wall, an arrow pointing in, and a J. So this is how Jeremy escaped. Even so, Frankie feels like she's trading one trap for another. This tunnel is through pure dirt and is way more cramped than the vent. I just caught myself holding my breath again. Frankie can't help but think of Jeremy down here before her, crawling through the dirt in the dark. The weird guy she never spent more than 5 minutes talking to. He must have been so lonely, and now he's gone. Frankie then finds an opening and emerges into a small room. At the center is a carousel pole covered in roses and piercing through the skull of a stag on top. She touches one of the flowers and it instantly turns to dust in her hand. At the base of the pole is a strange black liquid, like tar or something. She looks at the ceiling and spots what could be another opening. She even finds footholds dug into the wall leading to it. This must have been Jeremy's doing when he escaped. Frankie's starting to think that she never gave the guy enough credit. She climbs the wall with her remaining strength through some spider webs and presses her hand against the ceiling at the top. There is a secret opening and she climbs out onto the surface and into the grass. She rolls onto her back and laughs, looking up at the blue sky, appreciating it now more than ever. The chapter ends with her saying once again, "It's time to leave this town right now." Man, it is so satisfying after most of this chapter taking place in the dark for Frankie to pop out into those bright colors. The green grass and the blue sky. It really conveys the feeling of escape from the underground so well. I felt like I was taking a deep breath right along with her, which is why this is one of my favorite chapters of any comic I've read lately. Well, that's where I'm going to end it today. Like I said, if you want me to continue covering this series, let me know in the comments and I'll finish it up. Go support the author Punko over on Webtoons. They actually have a great companion comic called Stagtoons where you get some behind the scenes on the series in a comical way. Like how originally Punko submitted Stagtown as part of a 3-month comic contest, but only learned about it near the end of the 3 months. So she did the whole thing in 10 days with barely any sleep. Pretty cool. Also, the mystery in Stagtown goes very deep. There's actually an ARG associated with the comic, and if you look back on various pages, you'll find numbers, symbols, and hidden messages. Not to mention that the website on Jeremy's computer is real and you can visit it right now. There's actually a whole Discord surrounding this ARG. I haven't dived into it myself, so I don't know if it's still ongoing or not, but I'm excited to check it out. Shout out to Kill Me Katie as always for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now. And if you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email me with a social media handle or name at the address below. But I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grief speaking. Goodbye, friends.
I can't reach his ghastly impressions. Nothing but organic pollution. I can't reach his ghastly impressions.
Child of God is one of the most unsettling comics I've read. Is it because of the violent murder? Partly. Is it because of the showcase of human ugliness? Sure. But mostly it's because the story is the first-person account of a psychopath and killer. We look into the mind of someone who completely disassociates with the rest of humanity and feels no remorse for his destructive and sadistic actions. Trapped in a bubble of nihilism, he sees human life as meaningless, and so wants to destroy everything. Worse than that, you get the sense that the evil within this killer is almost a cosmic force, or at least he thinks so, and that in itself is scary as hell. This is a comic that is gruesome, barbaric, and depressing. The beautiful art style helps make a slight buffer from the unhinged acts of graphic violence displayed, but make no mistake, this story is not for the faint of heart. This is Child of God. Hello friends, this is Grease speaking. Today we're going to be taking a short break from Western comics and dipping our toes back into the messed up world of horror manga. Many of you may be familiar with my Disturbing Manga Iceberg series. While making that, I read some of the foulest and most depraved works of horror fiction I'd ever encountered. Some of these mangas were so revolting, I straight up blocked them out. I basically took the Men in Black neuralizer and wiped that shit from my memory. But some of these comics, as disturbing as they were, still stick with me for one reason or another. One example is a one-shot horror comic called Child of God. With a mixture of beautiful, unique art and unsettling storytelling, this is one of those messed up comics I just had a hard time putting down. It follows the life of an unnamed serial killer and cult leader starting from birth to adulthood. If you're a fan of the novel No Longer Human or Junji Ito's manga adaptation, you'll find the autobiographical style here familiar. This is a first-hand account of a psychopath. I should note that in this manga, the central character is never actually named, which makes it so much harder to explain in a video like this. So just for the sake of ease, I'll be calling him Norman, named after the iconic psycho himself, Norman Bates. Anyway, this long of an intro always gets me a little antsy, so let's get right into the comic. This is Child of God Explained. Chapter 1, Child of a Black Sun. On the very first page, we see an infant in a toilet, and it has one of the most what the fuck opening lines I've ever read. This is how I was born. I was born from my mother's asshole. You must allow me absolute freedom. I mean, what a way to kick things off, and honestly, this is a good insight into how messed up this manga gets. We then get some strange cosmic imagery as Norman describes coming into existence in his mother's belly and how he watched as dozens of his brothers and sisters were digested. We see him as a sperm, and he explains how he attached himself to his mother's stomach lining. He slowly begins to form into a fetus, and we see his birth into the toilet bowl. Looking up, he sees a black hole, which he calls a god of revenge. This is where his story begins. A child of blood and excrement. The child of God. He simply says, "Then I stood up and began my life." He goes into a T-pose and his shadow forms a cross on the floor as he dedicates his new life to getting revenge on the world. Yeah, so in this chapter, it's hard to separate what is literally happening from the poetic language, but the fact that he ended up in his mother's belly and mentions all his potential siblings being devoured implies that he was a product of not intercourse but oral sex. Somehow he managed to survive as sperm and grow within her belly until he was ready, and his mother shat him out. There's pretty clear symbolism in the art here that is just vague enough that I don't think I have to blur, but basically the black hole seems to be, well, his mother's hole. Whether this is what actually happened or just a mythological origin story, it's still really disturbing. Honestly, we haven't even scratched the surface on this one, so let's keep moving. Chapter 2. Childhood. On this chapter cover, we see many children carrying different small pets, except for Norman, who's holding a severed human arm. In the region Norman grew up in, there was a custom. If a baby walked before their first birthday, a large ball of sticky rice was tied to their back. That way they wouldn't leave their parents when they grew up, I guess. Norman stood up at 10 months old, and as expected, his family tied the rice to his back. However, Norman didn't fall down, and soon someone pushed him so that he fell onto his back. Everyone then looked down at him, laughing. He didn't cry though. Instead, he lay there as they stared at him, as if he was dead. We jump forward in time a bit to Norman's first trip to the barber. He's wearing a dress here and says that he was raised as a girl until the age of 2 and never had his hair cut. This is just an interesting aspect of the story that is never brought up again. Anyway, as him and his mother sat in the waiting area, Norman looked up and saw a disturbing thing. The barber's chairs had become what he describes as executioner stands. One by one, boys climbed onto the platforms and melted. This bizarre process seemed familiar to him. He looked at his mother only to find an old witch in her place. She told him that these were his brothers, and he understood her to mean that he is the only survivor out of countless children who have died. It's another strange and symbolic section, but let me warn you, the second part of this chapter jumps right into the shit. Literally. Norman says he developed the habit of playing in his feces since his parents failed to potty train him. The pungent smell induced a sort of ecstasy in him, and we can see the kid rubbing it on his face. He then mentions how sometimes he would even eat it. My God. I haven't covered anything this gross in a while. Finally, his parents were fed up. They consulted a doctor who recommended that they give Norman clay to play with as a substitute. As the doctor hoped, Norman lost his fixation with poop and became utterly obsessed with the clay. He built hundreds of clay figures until his room was filled with them. Then, one day, he smashed all of them to bits, ripping their heads and limbs off in a brutal fashion. He labels this as his first atrocity, and we can see from his perspective that he imagines the clay figures to be real. Human figures cover the floor around him with their bodies torn apart. Shortly after this, Norman's pet cat was killed, and we can see its head sat in a puddle of blood, as well as its body nearby with its guts torn out. If you're uncomfortable with this kind of gore, it only gets worse. Norman says he loved the cat, and it loved him, but we can see him brandishing an axe, implying he was the one who gutted it, as if we didn't already guess that. After this, Norman cried all day long, and the adults tried to comfort him, never suspecting him as the killer. It's interesting to me that he doesn't call them his parents, but just adults. So you could already see his level of emotional detachment. Norman then sat crying until he himself no longer believed he killed the cat. Once this happened, he suddenly stopped crying. This was the year before he started elementary school, which leads us to Chapter 3, First Love. Norman starts elementary school, and his parents put him in a class for the emotionally disturbed, as well as those with personality disorders and mental disabilities. I guess they could sense something was wrong with this kid. Norman says this was a waste of time because he had already rejected things such as emotions and personality as unnecessary to his life. Every week he went to the group and had no idea how to interact with the other kids. They drooled, and some of them picked their noses and ate their snot. So Norman did everything he could to avoid touching them. Because of this, he was labeled uncooperative, and it was taken as a possible sign of autism. Not wanting to be sent to a hospital or institution, he tried to build good relationships with the adults, taking part in their stupid games. Here we can see Norman playing a traditional Japanese children's game called Hige-Jisan, meaning old bearded man. He plays the game perfectly, trying to fit in and seem normal, but clearly he takes no joy from it and finds it ridiculous. Norman found only one thing bearable amongst the miserable hours that he spent there. One of the volunteer teachers, a college student. She noticed that Norman didn't like playing with the other kids, and so out of kindness, she played with him. They would sometimes cuddle, and while he didn't understand fun, he thinks he must have been experiencing something like pleasure. When he uses the word fun here, I think he means like arousal. Later in the story, the word fun comes up several times, and it clearly seems to be a sexual thing, and it's just so chilling the way he describes this stuff. It was only because of this teacher and to please his parents that Norman endured the humiliation of participating in this class. One day, while watching the other children, Norman realized that his favorite teacher wasn't there. He searched the surrounding area for her, eventually wandering into the woods. Here, he found a small cabin and heard screaming coming from inside. He peeked through the window to see something absolutely horrific. Though at the time, Norman had no idea what he was witnessing. We see the college girl is being assaulted by a masked man. It seems he had kidnapped and brought her here. It is a brutal scene, as in the process, the masked man is choking her to death. After the man finishes, it's clear the girl is dead, and he leaves her corpse behind. Norman watches all of this through the window and enters the cabin after the man leaves. He stands over the girl's naked body and just stares at her, commenting on her swollen face. Instead of screaming in terror or crying, this twisted-ass kid blushes, and in one of the most up comic panels I've seen recently, he moves in on the corpse, describing this as his first sexual experience. Oh my god. He goes even further by saying that this influenced all of his later sexual encounters. And it only gets worse from here, guys. Chapter 4. Prey. Norman has now entered middle school, and his parents were pleased that their child, who was once considered mentally disturbed, was now doing great in school. However, Norman thought of this school as a prison, and in a great sequence, the kids shift into apes and pigs. This is the way he sees them. It kind of reminds me of No Longer Human, when Oba sees others as insects. Norman determined that this place had absolutely nothing to do with him, though there are certain skills needed to navigate society, like learning not to stand out. But it's not enough just to sit quietly. hey, that can be just as noticeable. The trick is to be average, to be averagely cheerful, smart, stupid, and obedient. And Norman learned to wear a faint, cowardly smile on his face, honing these skills in order to distance himself from society. It was all so meaningless to him. The children here were not very picky about their prey. Any small perceived difference was enough to attract attention, and Norman's class chose a lone girl to torment. We then see an example of this horrible bullying. I mean, really, this is beyond bullying, it's assault. But some kids pin the poor girl down on her desk and grab her hand. One of the bullies holds up a needle, saying, if you make a sound, you'll get another one, and if you cry, that's another on top of that. Then, in a sequence that is honestly hard to look at, the bully sticks the needle into the girl's finger right under her nail. Of course, the girl cries out in pain, and so they stick a needle into another finger. It makes my hands tingle just to think about it. The students then tell the girl to say thank you, and she does. She thanks them for this torture. Jesus Christ, I thought Norman was bad, but these kids are sadistic too. And it's all for no particular reason, just that the girl was a little different. And don't worry, it just keeps getting worse. One day in class, some of the students pass around a video camera. On it was a video of the girl being dragged into the bathroom. The other girls surrounded her and made her defecate. Then they forced her to eat her own excrement. I told you it got worse. And by the way, for such a short comic, this is the second time we've seen coprophagia. Although in this case, it's not a medical disorder, but just straight up coercion. So the kids all passed around this video and laughed. Okay, I actually side with Norman on this one. These kids are monkeys and pigs. He makes the point that these children would one day become adults. They would be considered good citizens. That day, Norman stayed after school to help a teacher with something, and when he returned to the classroom, he found the bullied girl still sitting at her desk, staring off into space. As he got closer, he realized she had wet herself, and her fear was so great that no expression could convey it. Instead, her face was blank, and she sat in a sort of shock. Watching her, Norman found she piqued his curiosity. Just as the rest of the class saw her as prey, he too saw her as a sort of prey. He approaches her and asks if he could help her. She just stares at him, and he then asks, "Shall I kill them for you?" Which leads into our next chapter. Chapter 5, The First Murder. Well, it gets right to it. The very first image in this chapter is the most shocking so far. One of the students' naked corpse belly down in the dirt. Her head and hands are cut off and placed upright. Most disturbing is a bouquet of flowers that seem to be shoved up her tail end. This is like a Hannibal Lecter level presentation. Norman purposely situated the body in the open area behind the gym so that the students would find it before the teachers. They formed a circle around it and stared silently in shock as if performing a strange ritual. Eventually, the teachers came out and called the police, then sent the children home, aside from the first few who found the body. We can see Norman and the bullied girl lock eyes. It seems this was one of the girl's bullies, and she must heavily suspect that this was Norman's doing. The school was then closed down for a while, and the story was all over the news, though Norman pretended to be indifferent. Well, more accurately, he really was indifferent. Once again, we are hit with a sudden and jarring image as the next page showcases the second murder. This time, the body was found in a nearby park the day that the school started back up. It's easily the most graphic image so far. The girl's stomach is cut open and her entrails are pulled out, strangling her. Her intestines, which she's hanging by, are wrapped around her neck and shoved into her mouth as well. Once again, it's an almost artistic display with the body being placed intentionally. After this incident, cameras were put up in the schools, though Norman calls it a pathetic attempt by the adults. And then we see the third crime. This time, a student is shoved into a toilet in the bathroom. A broom handle is placed under their knees and their legs are tied shut. Once again, their stomach is cut open and it seems like there's some object shoved inside. The media had made up its mind. This was the work of a perverted serial killer. The reports were quite detailed, but Norman seems almost pissed off that the news had neglected to mention how the victim's was violated, as if he's not getting all the credit he deserved. The crimes were not discussed in front of the children. Norman says that children were always viewed as victims and that this was part of his plan. He began to feel omnipotent, but at the same time wrapped in a bubble of vague nihilism. One day while out for a walk, Norman encountered the bullied girl walking her dog. They hadn't spoken since that day in the classroom. She approaches him and asks him to stop, saying that the last victim wasn't involved in the bullying. Norman simply replies that they were all involved as far as he's concerned. The girl suggests that he'll eventually get caught, but Norman believes this won't happen since he has no connection to the victims. The girl then asks, "What if I tell?" But Norman doesn't believe that she would. She looks at him and says, "You're right." And then she grins and practically skips away. The first time he had ever seen the girl smile. Then, in a jarring page turn to the next panel, we see the girl hanging from a tree by the dog's leash and a bucket kicked over below her. Although on its face it looks like the girl did this to herself, it's also a possibility that Norman forced her to do it. Either way, it's a sad end to this girl's sad life. Chapter 6. Boys. We have another time jump here to when Norman was 14 and had made something like a clubhouse in an abandoned factory outside of town. Here he would meet with 12 younger boys who were all drawn to him like a cult leader. At this point, no one spoke about the incidents from a few years back, as if the whole town was determined to forget it ever happened. Norman believed these boys, even though they had no way of knowing, could sense something in him. Something children are instinctively fascinated with: death. Although Norman was now going through puberty, he had no interest in girls and in fact found them to be disgusting. After school, he watched the boys play for hours in the clubhouse. Often it was a game of cowboys and Indians. He would separate them into two groups and make them pretend to kill each other, and he would play the leader of the cowboys. Norman says they made the games historically accurate and the Indians would always be slaughtered. They would run around naked and the cowboys would scalp them. We see this all playing out in the imagination of the kids as if it's real, including the barbaric scalpings. At the end of these games, Norman sat with a pile of scalps at his feet. In reality, these were just wigs, but it served as a substitute for the murderous impulse that had grown within him since his last killing. One day they brought a new kid to Norman, saying they found him by a train station hungry. Norman describes the boy as dirty and beautiful. Apparently he ran away and his parents didn't even care. Norman asks him if he's hungry and throws him a bread roll, which the boy gobbles up. He stares at the kid all creepy and asks if his parents abandoned him. There's an eerie image here of the frame behind Norman taking on the pattern of the Black Sun. Chapter 7. Holy Communion. I warn you now, this is probably the most up chapter in this whole manga, which is saying something. Norman looks down on the child as he eats the bread like a looming figure of death. He says, to be honest, he fully understood what he was to the boy at that moment. He completely lost the will to resist. Norman pulls out a knife and says, "That's right, accept me, good boy. I will be the one to decide." He slices the boy's cheek and then moves in and starts licking the blood out. Ugh, it's so creepy. He then uses the knife to cut the back of the boy's shirt and shorts off, and, well, you can imagine what happens next. It's one of the most uncomfortable things I've seen in any manga. You can just see the tears welling up in the boy's eyes and Norman's cheeks turn red. This goes on for a moment while the other boys watch, and finally, after the act is finished, Norman pulls the knife up again and repeatedly stabs the boy in the back while blood sprays onto his face. As up as this manga is, the art is so unique and striking. The boy bleeding out on the floor as Norman looks at him, his face covered in blood. It's just visually very cool. So Norman just stands there staring at the blood pools around his feet, and the other kids keep watching silently. He describes this as a religious ceremony and proceeds to do a bizarre and terrifying ritual. He cuts off small chunks from the dead kid's defiled backside and throws them on the ground in front of the other boys. He then instructs them to eat the flesh and calls it bread. With tears running down their faces, the children eat the boy's flesh, and in the process, something new is born. Later, they chop the body up and hid it in the woods. Norman watched as they all dug holes in the ground and buried the body parts. It was then that something crystallized in Norman like an awakening. He became aware of his influence and desired to make use of it. Chapter 8. The Path to Freedom. More time passes and Norman is a little older, at this point looking more like an adult. He makes a creepy comment about how the boys in his cult had all grown up as well, and were at their most beautiful. The group was no longer satisfied by simply pretending to murder in their games. At first, they began attacking vagrants, and we see the boys using weapons to beat a man to death in the dead of night. Norman notes the way the boy's eyes glittered with bloodlust in the darkness. Great, he's fully formed his own personal troupe of psychopaths. The group continued to kill homeless people, carefully varying the time, location, and method as not to connect the murders. But it was too easy. The police hardly pursued the cases and chalked it up to infighting between vagrants. Society didn't seem to care either. The same people who years before made a fuss over a handful of dead kids couldn't care less if every last outcast was murdered. This aspect of society disgusted Norman. Next, they began attacking random passerby out in the open and surprisingly pulled it off. Norman describes how they would do it. Find someone walking alone, preferably an ordinary salaryman or housewife, stab them right through the heart so there's no struggle, and leave the knife in place. Then walk away as if nothing happened. And that's it. easy. It would often take over an hour before anyone even noticed the body. Most people didn't want anything to do with someone collapsed in the street. This person was nothing but an annoyance and a spectacle. While most of the murders in this comic are gory and revolting, these more subtle murders are still really scary because it makes you think maybe someone could pull this off in real life. Imagine you're walking in a crowd and get stabbed through the heart, not even being able to process what happened, and how long would it take for anyone to notice? Well, not a single one of the boys was caught doing this, and the police were powerless in the face of these unmotivated and unrelated murders. They were satisfied with these thrilling games, but Norman felt something was missing, and he knew exactly what it was: freedom and clarity. There's a creepy image here of Norman sitting in his chair as if it's a throne. He decided to kill his parents next. Not because he had anything against them, but because he needed absolute freedom. So he ordered the boys to do it. He wasn't hesitant in killing them himself, but there needed to be no connection, a rule that he took seriously. Next, we see Norman's parents sitting around the dinner table when the boys break through the window and begin to attack them, all the while singing happy birthday for some reason. Sometimes this comic reminds me of Clockwork Orange as well. It's a creepy scene of them singing and tormenting the couple, strangling the father and stabbing the mother. As they finish the song, they smash the mother's face into a cake she'd made, and they all stand there staring at the lifeless bodies. Next, the house is burning down. Norman and the Colt watch the flames, and for some reason tears run down his cheeks. Then he saw it in the flames, the writhing throng of his future. Within the fire, there are hundreds of boys looking back at him, implying he wants to expand his cult. The fire was eventually put out, and Norman reveals it was his 17th birthday. This means that the cake the mother made was likely for Norman, which makes the whole happy birthday thing even more sick. Chapter 9, The Stumbling Stone. We see Norman in bed with, I'm assuming, one of the boys, but because of the androgynous art style, I'm not really sure. He says that his parents left him a large inheritance that was more than enough to live off of as he grew up. So he never had to work and was thankful to his parents. The person in bed asks him what's the matter, and he just says, "Oh, I was just hoping humanity would be wiped out soon." It's scary that this is a casual thought for him. One day, one of the guys in his group says that he wants to leave, something that truly surprises Norman. He says that he's leaving for a girl that he likes. Norman is shocked and asks him if he really finds women fun. The kid just nods, and surprisingly, Norman gives him his blessing, telling him to go, and if he ever wants to come back, he'll be received with open arms. The kid practically runs away, and the others ask Norman if he's sure. He confirms that they do not chase those who wish to leave, and that recurring black sky pattern appears behind Norman's eyes and the members of the cult. It seems this is implying that Norman is not happy about the kid leaving, and something sinister is building up within him. Next, we see the kid who left the group on a day out with the girl he loves. They seem to be getting on really well. Later on a dark night, the boy has put together a bouquet for the girl who's waiting for him at a park bench. We can see that familiar black sun pattern filling the shadows around them. The girl sits on a bench under a street lamp waiting for him, and in the darkness, we see some figures looming. They approach the girl, who is obviously frightened. Of course, it's members of Norman's cult. They surround her and then pin her down, beating her up and choking her on the pavement. The boyfriend shows up as the rest of the cult scatters off into the night. He drops the flowers at the horrific sight. His lady is naked, dead, and sprawled across the park bench, her eyes bloodshot from being choked. It's kind of heartbreaking, this guy standing here staring blankly at her corpse. Although, at the same time, we have to remember that this kid was part of the cult too, and likely killed several innocent people himself. I don't know, man. This comic just doesn't let up. It's so dark from start to finish. Chapter 10, Judas. As the guy carries the girl he loved deep into the woods, we hear Norman's monologue. He says he was a fool. He broke his only rule, that murder should have no reason, goal, or connection, though he knows what it was that made him do it. Since the world began, there was one emotion that stayed constant for him: fear. It's clear that Norman hates the fact that he allowed emotion to rule over him, and thinks that acting in this way is too much in line with the world that he despises so much. It's also interesting to note that Norman doesn't say since he began or since he was born, he says since the world began, implying that the whole universe came into existence with him. The kid lays the girl's body down and pulls out a knife. At first, it looks like he's going to chop up her body and bury her, but instead he seems to have gone back to his old ways. We see what he's done to his girlfriend's body, and it is reminiscent of Norman's early murders. He's left a handful of cuts on her chest, but more unsettling, he cut off one of her breasts and shoved the bouquet of flowers he'd brought into her downstairs. It's absolutely disgusting. Norman says that the boy did return to him after this, but for revenge. We see him kneeling and asking for forgiveness over and over again until finally Norman goes over, kneeling beside the boy to comfort him. As he does this, the kid pulls out a knife and stabs Norman in the leg. And into the final chapter, chapter 11, Judgment. Norman is left bleeding on the floor, and the other kids in the cult all stare at him wide-eyed. It's as if they now see Norman's attacker as the new cult leader and quickly group around him, all asking what they should do next. After a short discussion, they decide to kill Norman. The new leader says that they need to give him the death he deserves. There's no hesitation from the group, and they only ask what this death should be. The new leader responds, "Let's feed him to the pigs." So they all pile into a truck and drive out to the countryside. Norman lay on a slab of wood, still bleeding profusely from the stab wound. The monsters he helped create stare at him blankly with no emotion behind their eyes. They bring his body to the pig pen at the farm and throw him into it. Quickly, the pigs surround him and start tearing him apart and eating his body. There's some beautiful art here as the pigs are all closing in. It's ironic that Norman saw the children in his school as nothing more than pigs, and now he's meeting his end by the same creatures he compared them to. In the end, we only see some blood and a section of Norman's head lying on the ground. He says, "Humanity should probably rejoice that my life ended like this, but you mustn't get careless. I will always be reborn again somewhere." And that is the end to Child of God. It really is a dark and morbid story from start to finish. There's obviously a ton of symbolic imagery in this manga throughout, and there are so many sequences that could be pondered on. I mentioned the recurring image of the black sun, a starry black pattern that shows up during Norman's violent acts, tying him to his belief that he is actually a cosmic-like entity born from a black star. Like I said, there's a lot you could unpack in this one, but I want to know what you guys think. Is it just a senseless excuse to display evil? Is it a work of art? And are there any deeper themes to explore here? I have to admit that no matter what Child of God is trying to be, I found it captivating either way. I should note that if you like the art style, this manga was made by a brother-sister duo who have actually produced a lot of really strange material over the years, and it's often just as disturbing as Child of God. If you guys want to see me cover more disturbing manga, let me know. I have a lot of comics like this that would be fun to run through. I know some of you are probably wondering where Feral Part 3 is. Well, don't worry, I will get back to it soon, but just felt like doing something a little different this week. Shout out to Kill Me Katie, as always, for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now. And if you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email me a submission to the address below with a name or social media handle. But I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grief speaking. Goodbye, friends.
I know that it haunts you, a better person. Know that we still love you, you're only human.
Hello friends, this is Grief speaking. Today we're continuing through Stagtown. If you happen to miss my first video on this series, you can click the link to go there first, but I will do a short recap here as well that covers all the major plot points. By the way, I have to point out that the author of Stagtown, Punko, actually left a comment on the first video, which absolutely blew my mind. And this is after Mike Burchell, creator of Everything Is Fine, left a comment on another video as well. I've been making these videos for a long time, and after years of covering all kinds of horror media, I can't explain how bizarre it is to have two big creators of popular webcomics even acknowledge my channel's existence. It's extremely humbling and surreal. Anyway, I had to mention that, but I get antsy when these intros are too long, so let's get into Stagtown Explained Part 2. Before we get into the comic, I thought it would be fitting to do a quick recap of my first video on Stagtown in case you missed it or just want a refresher before moving on. Frankie returns to her remote hometown in the mountains of Stagtown and quickly realizes something is deeply wrong. Strange, outdated security cameras are appearing everywhere, even inside homes, and no one knows who's behind them. Her neighbor Jeremy is a strange conspiracy theorist who tries to warn her about the cameras and eventually succumbs to fear and paranoia, hiding in a box lined with mirrors mirrors and becoming severely dehydrated. Frankie finds him in his apartment and takes him to the hospital. They try to escape Stagtown together, but one of the cameras comes to life and attacks him, ending in him seemingly dying in a horrific and fiery accident where he throws his burning body into the river. After his death, all the cameras go dead, except one, which appears to watch the town silently, its wires leading back to the river. Frankie continues encountering bizarre and terrifying phenomena, including a foster home called the Marble House, where masked children vomit polished rocks and their caretaker is revealed to be some kind of marble-filled hideous creature. Frankie narrowly escapes, but the trauma just keeps piling up. Following clues Jeremy left behind, she investigates the town's old carousel, a once grand landmark now mysteriously gone, and she's eventually led underground where she's stuck in a small tunnel for days. She nearly dies in the dark, but discovers evidence that Jeremy had survived down here before her and that he escaped. Using Jeremy's clues, she eventually finds a way out, feeling relief looking up at the blue sky. At the center of everything appears to be this missing carousel and a strange black substance that no one can explain. So now we're all caught up. Obviously you should check out the first video if you want a fuller context, but this should tell you all you need to know before we dive into the rest of the series. Chapter 5, Dead Man's Switch. After escaping the underground tunnel, Frankie doesn't care what's going on in Stagtown. She just wants to leave. Tired, dehydrated, and paranoid, she drives straight toward the tunnel out of town with Jeremy's cat and a few belongings. As she speeds through the dark tunnel, something strange happens. Raindrops begin to beat down on the windshield. Somehow, it's begun to rain inside the structure. Frankie puts her wipers on and floors it. Just short of the exit, however, a massive eye surrounded by a colossal set of teeth block it from view. Frankie screams out in terror and everything goes black. She then wakes up just outside the tunnel on the side of the road. She tries to piece together what happened when suddenly something triggers in her head and her pupils dilate. She just smiles and asks the cat if it had a good trip to the vet. She then starts up her car and heads back into town through the tunnel. Okay, what the hell just happened? And you might notice that this eerily mirrors the opening of this comic, Frankie waking up in her car and heading into town. She resumes her day-to-day life in Stagtown, clearly forgetting everything that's happened. She sees the jar of change that says moving fund and for a moment questions it, but her eyes dilate again and she decides it was left over from her move to the new apartment and to spend it on pizza. Something is clearly wiping her memory. She even says the same spiel from the beginning of the comic about how she's recently moved back to Stagtown after college, as if she's completely reset. Then while sitting in her car, she's approached by a man who keeps asking her if her name is Frankie. She's a little weirded out and tries to drive away, but he pulls out a paper and asks if she recognizes this symbol. It's an eye with antler-like appendages coming off the sides. At the side of it, Frankie is hit with a strange and disturbing vision. She sees the carousel and a large opening where a mirror would typically go, but it's got black liquid pouring out of it. Is this the same liquid we saw at the bottom of the pole in the underground, or is it blood? Frankie goes full freak out and then faints. When she comes to, she's in the man's apartment. She wakes up in a panic and pulls out her mace on the guy who seemingly kidnapped her, but instead of mace, it shoots silly string all over him. Yeah, I guess he replaced it while she was sleeping, and this is our introduction to Felix. He begs Frankie to calm down and let him explain. It turns out that Felix was a friend of Jeremy's before he died, and Jeremy would hang out at Felix's apartment quite often. While looking through his trash one day for a lost receipt, he came across a pile of papers that Jeremy must have left. On one of the papers, he saw the eye symbol and suddenly remembered something, an email that Jeremy had somehow sent him after he died, containing a ton of information on the Stagtown mystery. Felix discovered that his memory had been wiped several times, along with anyone who tries to leave town or digs too deep into what's going on. But this symbol can reset the memory wipes. Jeremy said in his emails that it only works on the last wipe though, so if you've lost your memory more than once, you can't get them back. This brings into question how many memory wipes Frankie's had. Clearly when Frankie woke up at the start of the series, it was just after losing her memories. So what kind of horrors has she already experienced? We may not find out at this point. Felix originally learned about the symbol when Jeremy asked him to permanently tattoo it onto his stomach so that he could always see it and prevent memory wipes. Yeah, I guess Felix is an amateur tattoo artist. So Frankie and Felix decide to work together and figure out what's going on so they can escape town. Frankie suggests calling the police or some kind of outside help, but Felix says that he can't call any outside numbers and can't even communicate online. They're physically and digitally cut off. This might explain why no one seemed to notice Frankie's post after she went missing for a couple of days in the woods back in chapter 4. After their newly formed partnership, they relocate to Frankie's apartment to look through Jeremy's notes. Hopefully Felix could make better sense of them and they could find a way out. By the way, we learned that Jeremy's cat is actually named Little Friend. It's kind of a weird name, reminds me of the dog from The Simpsons, Santa's little helper. Anyway, Felix stumbles onto the little love notes Jeremy made about Frankie, and he starts laughing his ass off about it, embarrassing Frankie to death, who reiterates that she barely knew him. Other than that, he doesn't have much luck finding anything. Frankie says that before they get any deeper into whatever's going on in Stagtown, they should at least try to leave, so she marks every exit on a map. Obviously, the tunnel is off limits, so that leaves the train station, the back road through the old covered bridge, the hiking trails to the north, and finally the river. Frankie asks if Jeremy ever mentioned trying to escape, but it seems like they mostly just hung out and played video games together. Felix did notice that something was up with Jeremy though. He clearly wasn't getting any sleep and seemed off toward the end. The two decide to test one of the town exits, and in the meantime, Felix has made up some temporary tattoos of the eye symbol that they put on their arms so they don't get memory wiped. Chapter 6, The Way Out. Frankie and Felix meet up the next day at the train station to see if they can get out of town by train. We get a sense of the difference in personality between the two when we see their luggage. Frankie has a full backpack and suitcase, and Felix just has a small sack which is mostly taken up by yarn. I guess it's one of his hobbies and he might want to knit on the train. Well, they head up to the station and find that it's boarded up and shut down, even though it should be running several trains a day. They check out the schedule on a nearby board and see that the next stop is 10 miles out. They could walk it and still get there by nightfall. Frankie immediately starts making a plan to head back home and grab more supplies, but before she finishes her thought, Felix insists that they go now. She calls him reckless, but he says, hey, reckless gets things done, and starts heading down the tracks. Frankie reluctantly follows behind him. After walking a while, they see something up on the tracks. A dead deer. On a closer look, they find the animal is full of holes. It's pretty disturbing, and Frankie suggests they go back, but Felix convinces her to just keep moving. So they move along for hours until reaching a spot where the tracks had given out. The rails are oddly bent out of shape, leaving only the wooden railroad ties left as a path. Frankie warns Felix that this is what they do. They lead you in circles till you go crazy, but he takes her hand and drags her along. As they walk along the path, the track boards begin to sink into the ground deeper and deeper until finally they descend into a large hole in the ground, at the top of which lay a marble. After the Marble House incident, this small sphere is a pretty creepy thing to find. After a moment of staring into the abyss, both Frankie and Felix refuse to go down and stop to take a break and eat lunch. Felix begins to knit something, and Frankie looks uncomfortably at the marble she found. She suddenly recognizes a connection between all the recent events. They all lead underground. The Marble House kids were digging into the foundation under the basement, the security cameras led into the earth, and then of course the horrible tunnels that she escaped from. As she speaks, we start to hear a gurgling noise, and then a black liquid rises from the hole in the tracks. They watch in horror as the liquid reaches the top and pours onto the ground. Then, out from under the black, something starts to crawl out, although we can only make out its knife-like appendage. The duo run like hell back down the tracks as the unseen monstrosity follows behind, its sharp limbs piercing the boards as it moves. They ran the entire way back, but whatever was chasing them never attacked, as if it was only herding them back to Stagtown. They finally reach the station, and Frankie physically breaks down, covered in sweat. Felix picks her up and carries her to his Jeep before speeding off. At the edge of the woods, we can see once again the legs of the creature. It seems like the appendage is actually made up of several pieces of junk, including a pair of scissors. After this frightening encounter, the two don't leave Frankie's apartment for 3 days. They're both too afraid to be alone, and so Felix has been sleeping on the couch. Finally, he decides he's gonna try one of the other exits out of town on his own. That way, if he does end up being led in a circle, he can leave Frankie out of it. So he heads out to the old covered bridge with nothing but a backpack and a baseball bat. It seems easy enough. He can see the exit only a few yards away, and he starts walking across. After only a few feet, rain starts pouring down outside almost instantly. Felix takes a look at his tattoo of the symbol to make sure he doesn't forget what he's doing, and then begins to hear something outside the bridge making its way toward him. It finally appears behind him, and it seems to be the same creature from the tracks, only this time we can see its full body. Its head with a massive needle sticking out and rusty screws protruding all around it. It pounces at Felix, who manages to dodge it just in time. He starts to slowly back away from it, but it lunges at him again. He turns, running for the exit, though it seems like it's an unreachable distance, and the bridge is stretching out in front of him. The creature lunges again and manages to slam into Felix's head, sending him to the ground. It then uses its large spike to stab Felix in the foot. Oof, that looks painful. bicycle. He kicks it off and stands up, swinging at it with his bat, but the metal fiend dodges and jumps off the wall, then onto Felix's back, pinning him to the ground and jabbing the spike into his neck. Oh my god, I didn't expect that. It doesn't look deep enough to kill him, at least. It actually looks kind of like it's injecting something into him. He cries out in pain and loses consciousness. We just see his body laying still while the outside storm quickly eases up and the bright sun shines in its place. Back at Frankie's place, she wakes up late to find that Felix is gone. She tries calling him but gets no answer. She's pretty bummed out, assuming that Felix bailed on her, and she believes there's no one she can trust in this messed up town. She tries calling him one last time. After a few rings, she realizes that she can hear a phone ringing in the hallway, and it's getting closer. Eventually, the rings stop just outside of her door, and she sees a shadow coming from under the other side. Is this Felix? Something is not right here. Why isn't he answering the phone or even knocking? Frankie nervously approaches the door and looks through the peephole. She's relieved to see that it is Felix on the other side. She begins to unlock the door when the cat, little friend, starts hissing furiously. Then Felix speaks, but something is up with his voice. He's talking really strangely, dragging out some words and stuttering, to the extent that Frankie wonders if he's drunk or something. It's clear that something is very wrong, and Frankie can't bring herself to open the door. Felix insists she open up and start calling her out by name. It's really off-putting. Tears begin to form in Frankie's eyes as she declares that this person isn't Felix. After a while of this, Felix, or whatever it was, just up and leaves, and Frankie breaks down sobbing, believing that she really is going crazy. Meanwhile, the real Felix wakes up in a basement somewhere, coming to realize he's on the ground floor of Frankie's apartment building. He feels guilty for leaving her alone and rushes up to her apartment to make sure she's okay. Only her door is completely missing. It's just a blank wall. Here we move into another Remember segment. These are little segments peppered throughout the series that give us a little insight from the past of the characters. In this one, we learn a little bit more about Felix and Jeremy's friendship. Jeremy tries talking about the supernatural things that have happened to him, but Felix just makes him a sandwich and says he's got to get more sleep and remember to eat. It moves forward a few weeks, and Felix can't get a hold of Jeremy, but is pretty worried about him. Ultimately, he decides he doesn't need to babysit a grown man. A few months pass, and Felix finally shows up to Jeremy's place with some food, but he won't answer the door. And this seems to be the last attempt at communication with him before Jeremy died. Pretty sad. Chapter 7, Alone. Back in the present, Felix is in shock. What the hell happened to Frankie's apartment? He runs outside and finds that the window and balcony are missing as well. He stops a man who lives in the building and asks him what happened, and the guy's like, I don't know, dude, I'm not paying attention to the outside of the building. Next, he tries knocking on her neighbor's doors, but doesn't get an answer. One of the apartments sounds completely empty by the sounds of the knocks. He tries to call the landlord, but finds that the office is closed on weekends and it's Friday night. If he calls the police, there's no way they'd believe him, and the wall's pretty solid, so he's not going to be able to just break it down very easily. He finally sits down, feeling out of options, and lets out some tears of frustration. He doesn't want to lose another friend to this madness. He's determined not to give up though, and next we see him wearing a disguise as a maintenance worker. He breaks into the empty apartment next to Frankie's and puts a sign up on the door that says maintenance personnel is working inside. I guess he's hoping to access her apartment through this one. Inside, Felix pulls out a drill and apparently the largest drill bit he could buy. He starts to drill a hole into the wall, hoping that he can at least communicate with Frankie on the other side. After a small struggle, he manages to drill the length of the bit. He pulls out a small flashlight to look through the hole and finds that it's solid wall even beyond where he drilled. He starts to question how it could possibly be more than 2 feet and then beats himself up for even trying. If a whole apartment could disappear, why did he think this would work? He tries to convince himself that Frankie is fine, but can't help but think about her dying in some terrible way. He blames himself for what's happening to her and Jeremy's death on top of it, and in defeat, he leaves the apartment. Looking out from the stairwell balcony, he tries to think up his next move, and in the distance on the grass, we can see some of the mysterious black liquid bubbling up from the dirt. We shift back to Frankie's perspective. Exhausted after the ordeal with the bizarro Felix at her door, she laid down in bed and fell asleep. Now she wakes up and finds that her front door is missing, along with the windows and balcony. She also has no phone service or internet, so out of desperation, she starts trying to break down the wall. Although she just manages to break one of her chairs doing so. She starts beating herself up for not having any kind of hammer or backup plan, until finally she's just telling herself it's fine on repeat. Clearly she's losing it a little, and she starts to remember the time she spent alone in the tunnel underground. This causes her to have a sort of panic attack, and she starts crying and feeling like she can't breathe. While this is happening, morning, little friend crawls into her lap and comforts her, snapping her out of it and calming her down. Thank God for this little cat. She gets her head on straight and starts to assess the situation. The fridge and oven both still work, and she has food, so she won't starve anytime soon, and the plumbing still works, so that's a relief. She wonders where Felix is and if he's trying to get in. Then she checks her fake tattoo and is glad to see it's still there. Just then she hears a noise from the other room that scares the shit out of her. She slowly moves towards the sound and finds her bedroom is now gone as well. Man, I was expecting one of those scissor creatures or something, but somehow this is worse. I can already feel the claustrophobia creeping up. Frankie starts pacing around and mumbling to herself, trying to come up with a solution. At the same time, tears are welling up in her eyes. Her bedroom's now gone, and where the front door once was, a weird shape has begun growing on the wall. If you look closely, it kind of looks like a face. Frankie quits pouting and goes back into planning mode. She takes the food from the kitchen and divides it up between rooms. That way, if the kitchen or other rooms vanish as well, she'll always have at least some food in whatever room she's in. She still has Felix's suitcase, so she takes the warm items out and divides them up in case it gets cold. After this, Frankie just sits down in the middle room where she could see most of her apartment at once. She's making some smart choices, I have to say. She doesn't know exactly what she's waiting for, and after a while, she can't help but fall asleep. When she wakes up, guess what? The living room's gone. She tries to decide which room she should move to, which will disappear next. Finally, she settles on the bathroom, where at least she has water and plumbing. She calls for little friend to come with her, but as the cat moves her way, the horrible noise sounds again, and the living room disappears, a wall coming down instantly and blocking it up along with the cat. But there's no time to grieve. The apartment begins shaking violently, and Frankie books it into the bathroom. The building is still rumbling, and a strange voice appears behind the bathroom door, moaning. A shape begins to form that looks similar to the shape on the wall by the doorway. The resemblance of a face is even clearer now. Then that familiar black liquid starts dripping from the bathtub, and the voice makes out an actual word. Help. It repeats this as the blackness drips from the ceiling, and Frankie looks above to see something shocking. The liquid has taken the shape of a stag and comes dropping out of the ceiling above her. Wow, that escalated very quickly. Next, we're back with Felix. He's sitting in his car and knitting furiously, trying to think of a way to save Frankie. He tries thinking back to what happened on the bridge, but his memory is fuzzy even after looking at the symbol. He goes back through everything he can remember up until he woke up in the basement. Wait a minute, the basement? Why did he wake up there anyway? He rushes into the building and heads downstairs to investigate. There he finds more of the black substance growing up out of the floor like thick vines and making its way into a water pipe. Nearby is a sledgehammer, and Felix thinks that someone must have helped this thing in here by busting a hole in the floor. Maybe the Felix outside of Frankie's apartment wasn't a doppelganger, but a possessed Felix. It seems like when that creature pierced his neck, it somehow was able to control him. He grabs the sledgehammer and heads upstairs to see where Frankie's door was. Then he's suddenly hit with a sharp pain and looks down to find his foot is bleeding. Oh yeah, I kind of forgot he was stabbed. He ignores the pain, closes his eyes, and takes a swing at where Frankie's door was, literally. Luckily, he makes contact with the wall, and when he opens his eyes, he finds that the door is back and he's busted it wide open. He rushes in looking around until finally he finds Frankie curled up in the fetal position in the bathroom crying. He holds her and tries to tell her that whatever she saw wasn't real, but she just sobs in his arms. This poor girl can't get a break. If she does make it out of Stagtown, she's gonna be pretty traumatized. Chapter 8, Holes. We see Felix driving somewhere in his Jeep and Frankie in the passenger seat, and she's not looking too hot. With nowhere else to go, they head to Felix's apartment. At this point, Frankie is terrified of being alone and panics anytime Felix leaves the apartment for anything. She doesn't even want him to leave the room, worried that he might disappear if he does. She eventually breaks down and tells him everything that happened to her. The tunnel, the Marble House kids, everything. That brings Felix up to speed, and they discuss what happened in the apartment. It all felt so real, but it must have just been in their heads. Felix remembers his full encounter with the metal creature now, and he's sure that when he was pierced with the needle, it injected something into him. He thinks it was the black stuff coming up from the basement and the railroad tracks. It seems that this substance is at the center of everything weird that's happening. Plus, if it did get into the water supply in Frankie's apartment, she probably ingested some of it at one point by drinking the water, which led to their shared hallucination. At any rate, they decide on only drinking bottled water from here on out. Frankie remembers the voices coming from the sink. Hallucination or not, it was odd that they seemed to be crying for help. She notes that most of the time, the supernatural presence doesn't actually try to hurt them, it just moves them around. Maybe if they can try and understand what it wants, they'd have a better shot at getting out. Frankie says she's done waiting around and wants to bring the fight to it before they run out of time. Just then, a massive noise sounds outside, feeling like an earthquake. They look out and find a massive sinkhole has opened up just outside Felix's apartment. It looks like they may be out of time already. After this, Felix's apartment was evacuated and the residents were relocated into hotels. Felix and Frankie plan their next move. The only two exits left to try would be the hiking trails and the river. The trails seem like a bad idea. It's too easy to get lost and they'd have a hard time escaping any monster they encounter. So that leaves the river. It's not a great idea either, but it's their best option, so they grab an inflatable life raft and prepare for the trip. In the hotel, they hear a ruckus out in the hallway and look out to find that all the other guests are leaving. Apparently 2 more sinkholes opened up and everyone's evacuating. Felix finds a spot on the map that they can drop the boat in the river, but this has become plan B now. With the entire town evacuating, they first want to see if they can get out along with everyone else. Believing that the force in Stagtown can't stop everyone, they get in a long line of cars out of town, but soon they realize that it looks like cars are being turned around and sent back. Felix flags down one of the cars heading back and asks what's going on. Apparently the authorities at the tunnel said it was okay to go back into town, and on a close look you can tell that the man's eyes are dilated. I guess it can stop everyone. After some discussion, Felix then convinces Frankie that they need to at least try helping the rest of Stagtown residents by showing them the symbol. They don't know if it'll work, but they plan to just give it one more day and they'll leave on the boat in the morning. That night, the two buy some spray paint and begin spraying the eye symbol around town. Frankie's first attempt isn't great, but they continue on painting the symbol all over town. They avoid placing them directly near roads in case the shock of it caused an accident and killed somebody. As they finish tagging up the side of a building complex, Frankie is just tired and wants to give up on all of it. But Felix gives her a hug and reassures her it's going to be okay, even making her laugh. It's hard to tell at this point whether they're kind of into each other or if this is just purely a platonic friendship, but anyway, they sit in Felix's car in the center of town overnight, waiting to see what'll happen when people spot the symbols in the morning. They wake up to the sound of screams. People are freaking out everywhere when they see the symbol. Some even collapse. After a while, Frankie starts to feel bad for what they've done and wonders if this is actually helping anything. Suddenly, a car smashes into the side of Felix's Jeep, and in a panic, they speed off. They were sure they didn't put any symbols where drivers could see, so what happened? Felix heads for the spot that they plan on leaving on boat, but they need to go the long way around since driving straight through town might be dangerous. He's clearly guilty about how many people might get hurt. At the edge of town, just by the carousel field, they find another car accident. Okay, they for sure didn't put any signs this far out, so what's going on? Nearby in the field, a rumbling occurs, and they look over to see a massive pole erupting from the ground with a deer skull on top of it. It looks just like the one Frankie saw underground. It rises up into the air, and the skull opens its mouth and makes a dreadful noise like a dying animal. It continues to scream, and suddenly Frankie's arm starts to burn. She pulls down her sleeve and finds that the tattoo of the symbol is melting off of her arm. Everyone in town seems to hear the noise and turn toward it, all of their eyes dilated, and Frankie says it was at this moment she realized there was no one left in town to save. Chapter 9, Welcome. After the horrifying encounter with the skull, Frankie and Felix drove off toward the drop point for the boat. It looks like the effects of the creature's scream completely burned off their tattoos, leaving severe burns on their arms, but at least they're in the shape of the symbol so they can still see it. They leave the car at the edge of the woods and make for a short hike to the riverbank. Surprisingly, nothing strange happens on their way. Felix starts setting up the inflatable raft, and Frankie pulls little friend out of her kennel. Oh man, I completely forgot about the cat. Well, at least they brought it a little cat life jacket. They gear up and head out onto the river. There's no turning back now. It would actually be a fun and beautiful trip if they didn't happen to be fighting against a supernatural force to escape with their lives. The closer they get to the town's border, the higher the cliffs rise, making it impossible to disembark at this point. Little friend starts making some growling noises, but they chalk it up to the fact that she's surrounded by water. Soon they see a bridge coming up overhead, a marker of the edge of town. Once they make it past that, they're out. Nearby in the woods, however, we see a sharp metallic leg enter frame. It looks like the creature is back. As they approach the bridge, Felix decides it's a good time to have a snack, I guess, and dumps a bunch of food out into the boat, to the disapproval of Frankie. Just then, a bright light shines from on top of the bridge, making Frankie's head hurt, and along the shore, the creature zips by at lightning speed, settling on an overhanging rock right in front of them. They try their best to steer clear of it, but the current is hard to fight, and the creature pounces from the rock directly at them. Felix blocks it with his oar, but it's only inches from his face, and it's viciously stabbing at him with its scissor hands. Frankie watches in horror and freezes when she sees something on the creature's side, a number 5. Why is this significant? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Right now, Felix is about to die. But out of nowhere, Little Friend, our favorite feline, comes to the rescue, jumping onto the metal thing and sending them both into the river. In the process, one of the scissor legs slashes the boat. But more concerning, that poor little cat is now being carried downriver. It's Felix's chance to return the favor. He jumps into the water and swims after Little Friend, grabbing hold of the cat before it gets too far away. However, Frankie was left in the sinking boat, and she's now moving downstream fast. Felix drops Little Friend off on a nearby rock and desperately makes for Frankie. It's a struggle, but he grabs a hold of her. But soon after, she's pulled by something under the water and dragged towards an underwater cave. They try grabbing onto the nearby wall, but it's no use. They're sent rapidly into the cave like a deadly water park ride, and the light is fading from the opening. They're headed right towards pitch black darkness. I was hoping we were done with the claustrophobic scenarios, but now we've added the possibility of drowning as well. The top of the cave starts to close in, and there's less and less room to breathe. There's a serious struggle to try and get air that is one of the most intense parts of this comic so far, and finally they're pulled completely underwater and into the seemingly infinite darkness. Surprisingly, we find Felix and Frankie alive and in a dry part of the cave. Somehow they survived. They're puking up water, but they survived. It's pitch black, but luckily Frankie still has Jeremy's light up keychain, giving them at least a small glow. They have a look around and find that they're stuck. There's no way they can swim back where they came from, and the river continues to flow underground ahead. Felix tries to keep a positive attitude, but Frankie has completely given up. She actually gets mad at him for even trying to stay positive and declares that they're gonna die here. More than that, with tears in her eyes, she says that this is all her fault. We're reminded of what Frankie saw in the metallic creature, the number 5. This is the same number that was on the box in Jeremy's belongings, the one Frankie opened with her knife. It seems whatever creature she let out has become stronger by adding pieces of metal to itself, starting with Frankie's pocket knife, which you can actually see at the top of one of its legs. So Frankie blames herself for all of this and adds on the fact that she froze up when it attacked Felix. She breaks down in a marathon of self-hate and blame. Even this is no match for Felix's upbeat attitude though, and he assures her that it's not her fault. No matter how much you plan, in situations as dangerous and bizarre as these, it's a miracle if you make any good decisions. He grabs her hand and tells her that he's made his fair share of mistakes as well, like getting an inflatable raft for instance, or heading to the bridge by himself. But whatever's after them isn't infallible. The ice symbol can stop it, so it does have some weaknesses. This little speech seems to raise Frankie's spirits, and they get back on track trying to think of a way out. One good thing is that Felix has some road flares he picked up beforehand, although he's weary to use them in this space, afraid it could consume a lot of their oxygen. They did come with matches, however, which gives them a little more light. At the side of the lit match, it's clear there's a slight draft in the room pushing at the flame. This leads Frankie to find the source of the airflow, and sure enough, she finds a small opening at the bottom of a nearby wall. It's just large enough for them to get through and leads into a long tunnel that's weirdly smooth and direct, as if it's man-made. Finally, they see an opening ahead, and as they approach, they hear something. It sounds like a carousel. They reluctantly move forward and see a warm glow coming from the opening. They finally enter and see a beautifully disturbing sight. The old town carousel upside down and wedged into the side of the cavern. Its lights are still on and music still playing. At the bottom, the black mirror that Frankie saw in a vision is visible, the strange liquid leaking out of it and into a large pool at the bottom. It's a haunting sight to say the least. Frankie moves forward and gets a good look at the pool of black stuff. Then she does something I didn't expect. She starts yelling at the carousel. She can't believe it forced them down here just for this. They've been tricked, dragged, and coerced by it, and for what? To see some garbage amusement ride? She says that their friend is dead because of it, and asks what the hell it wants from them. Suddenly, one of the stags at the top of the carousel turns its head to face them, its eyes glowing white. Its mouth cracks open, and the black stuff pours out as it struggles to speak, finally repeating the words, Fix us. There's a large rumble, and under the pool of black, the ground opens up and a set of stairs appears in front of them going downward. Frankie is even more pissed off and straight up says, no, go ask someone else. But the liquid on the floor is slowly closing in on them, and Felix says, I don't think it's asking anymore. Chapter 10. Back. Thinking fast, Felix pulls out one of his flares, saying that if it doesn't work, at least he can set fire to some of their stuff. He ignites, and it actually forces the liquid back. It seems like this thing is afraid of fire, but the flares are only temporary. They need to come up with a plan, and fast. Frankie spots an opening nearby, and they don't really have any better option, so they make a break for it. Using the flare to keep the black sludge at bay, they make it into the room, and it looks like they aren't the first ones. There's shelves everywhere full of jars. Felix moves a boulder in front of the opening and wedges the cracks shut with their life jackets, then sets the flare on top, hopefully keeping it from entering. Frankie takes a closer look at one of the jars and finds that it's full of marbles. Okay, always more questions and not many answers. After a moment, they realize there's no other exit and this may be the end. They curl up against the wall and wait to die. Then some of the black stuff starts pouring in from behind a shelf, though something is different about it. It almost has a bluish hue, and it forms into an arrow pointing behind the shelf. Frankie gets the sense that this isn't the same thing they were running from, and they decide to try and follow it. Felix pulls down the shelf, and they find another opening behind it. Inside, there's a strange structure like a large basin, and they freak out when they see what's lying inside. It's Jeremy, and he looks completely unharmed, no burns on him anywhere. Felix checks to see if he's alive and does find a heartbeat. He has tears of joy running down his cheeks, realizing that his friend is alive, but Frankie is more skeptical. She reminds Felix that she watched Jeremy die. How do they know this is really him and not a doppelganger or hallucination? They argue over this for a bit, and it's the only time Felix has actually snapped back at Frankie. She just asks that they make sure it's really him and try to find some kind of clue. They lift up his shirt to see if the tattoo is still on his stomach, and it's not, but the symbol is. It looks similar to Frankie and Felix's burned symbols, but this one looks a lot worse, like it was branded on or something. Well, this is enough to convince them that it's really him. Since the symbol wards off the Stagtown entity, it seems clear that this isn't a manufactured illusion. Near the structure that Jeremy is lying in, Frankie finds more jars. This time, one of them has a mysterious dark honey in it. Is this what they fed Jeremy with? Before they can question it anymore, the black liquid comes crawling out from above, bringing the whole damn ceiling down with it. Frankie tells Felix to carry Jeremy, and she lights up a couple flares, throwing one on the ground behind them and running away with the other. They make their way through the tunnel in a rush with no real way of knowing where they're going. They finally make it into a large room where they find mining equipment, realizing that this is why some of the tunnels have felt man-made. It's an iron mine. This is pretty good news because now they know there must be an exit somewhere. It seems Frankie knows a little bit about mines and has an idea of which way they should go, and she points them in the right direction. They find a massive mine shaft and a ladder leading out. The only problem is they have to carry Jeremy up the ladder without falling into the shaft below. Luckily, Felix is pretty strong, and he ties Jeremy's hoodie, with him still in it, around his body, giving him both hands to climb. He starts making his way up, and Frankie throws down the flare behind them as she follows. There's a massive rumble through the cave, and it knocks the hinges off the bottom of the ladder, leaving Frankie dangling at the end. Felix makes it to the surface just as the ladder breaks off behind him, and at the last second, he grabs Frankie's hand, pulling her up as well. They're safe at the top, but the black liquid is slowly filling the shaft below. In one last fuck you moment, Frankie grabs the last flare and chucks it down the shaft directly into the pool of blackness. This causes a massive explosion of fire out of the top, knocking them back into the dirt. The three friends make it back to Felix's car, where they find little friend is waiting for them. I was wondering what happened to that poor cat. Jeremy is still unconscious, and the future is uncertain, but Frankie is determined now to fight whatever's torturing them, and now she knows where they live. As she says this deservedly dramatic line, the comic rapidly moves underground, where we see a pool of liquid once again, and then an eyeball emerges from it. So that's basically the end of season 1 of Stagtown, but there is one more remember segment to cap it off, and this is actually the most informative of them so far. This time it's from Jeremy's perspective. He talks about the first time he met Frankie when she was moving into the building. Presumably this is the actual first time before any memory wipes, and she looks visibly younger. Her and Jeremy hit it off pretty quick, having similar hobbies and interests, and Frankie seems seems generally more positive and less cautious. She actually helped Jeremy in his research, and the two would go out exploring Stagtown and making notes. He says that she never laughed at his conspiracies, no matter how bizarre they seemed. We also learned that his flying saucer keychain was actually a gift from Frankie to begin with. Apparently they made big plans one day to go on a trip, and he waited all day for her, but when she finally showed up, she was different. She acted like she had never met him before, and no matter how hard he tried, she insisted she didn't know him. After this encounter, she mostly avoided him. Man, this really puts a whole new perspective on everything. She actually knew Jeremy, but was just memory wiped. Well, soon after this, Jeremy lost his memory too. But one day while doing research at the library, he stumbled upon the eye symbol in an old box, making him remember everything. He says he went through someone's notes named Nova, as if we know who that is, and discovered the effects of the symbol. After learning this, he immediately ran to Frankie's apartment to show her, but it only resets her to when she first forgot who Jeremy was. I guess she already had her memory wiped before, and unfortunately the symbol only restores the last wipe. So Jeremy was forced to just let her go. This is the event that sent him into his obsession with finding out the mystery of Stagtown and his depressive downward spiral. He still sees her in the hallways sometimes, but she's just a stranger to him now, and it hurts. She's gone from the hopeful, fun person he knew to someone quiet and serious, and sad. The only silver lining in this whole scenario is Jeremy finding little friend in a dumpster and adopting her. But man, this Remember segment really makes the whole situation with Frankie and Jeremy so much sadder. Well, that's where I'm going to end it today. Don't worry, I'll be finishing up this series in 1 or 2 more videos, so stay tuned for that. But what did you guys think of Season 1? Full disclosure, as of writing this episode, I actually haven't finished reading this series, so I'm in the dark as to how Season 2 goes. Is Jeremy actually okay? How did he heal from the burns? Who's Nova, and what happened to Frankie before her memory permanently reset? It seems like we're still at the tip of the iceberg, so I'm excited to get some answers. Shout out to Kill Me Katie, as always, for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now. And if you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email it to me with a social media handle or name at the address below. But I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grief speaking. Goodbye, friends.
I can't reach his ghastly impressions. I'm nothing but organic pollution. I can't reach his ghastly impressions.
3 adorable indoor cats are left stranded in the forest and must find their way home. Like a classic Disney adventure, right? They'll encounter all kinds of cute critters along the way, even if there's something not quite right about them. Why are their eyes red and mouths foaming? Well, at least there are people nearby, and indoor cats know that people are always nice to animals. Plus, they'll meet some new friends along the way to help them on their journey. Nothing bad could ever happen when you have friendship, even if they get scratched and start acting funny. Well, whatever happens, I'm sure Elsie, Patch, and Lord Fuzzy Britches will be just fine. Or they would be if this was a Disney movie. But this is a far cry from Disney. This is Feral, and looks can be deceiving as it's one of the most brutal and shocking horror comics I've read recently. Hello friends, this is Grief speaking, and today I'm covering the long-requested Feral. You may find the art style familiar as it's made by the same people that brought you Stray Dogs. Similar to Stray Dogs, Feral has a cute Don Bluth style aesthetic, but is actually a dark and gritty horror story. While Stray Dogs is a slow-burning psychological thriller, Feral starts off right in the shit and never lets up. If you like this comic, be sure to support the author and artist by buying a copy at your local bookstore. But that being said, we have a lot to get to. This is Feral Explained, Part 1. Starting with Chapter 1, Indoor Cats. We see a cat named Elsie cozily watching out a window on a beautiful day. She says, "This was perfect. This was every day. Before everything flipped upside down." It then cuts to an animal control truck cruising down a mountain road. In the back, dozens of cats are in containers. Elsie is calling out for another cat named Lord. He's in a container below her and just tells her to stop yelling. She's embarrassing him. She scolds him, telling him he needs to answer so she knows he's okay. Just then, a disturbed-looking fox stops in the middle of the road as the truck rounds a corner. In a panic, the driver swerves and the truck goes careening off the cliff, flipping in the air and landing upside down. The crash breaks the crates open, and and the surviving cats all flee into the woods. That's a hell of an opening. Elsie and another cat named Patch search around for Lord but can't find him. It seems Elsie, Patch, and Lord all have the same owners and live together. While looking for Lord, they start arguing. Patch criticizes Elsie for babying Lord all the time, saying he'll find his way back, and she snaps at him, saying no, he doesn't always find his way back. We see a flashback of Elsie watching out the window as her family searches the woods for Lord. We also learn that Lord is short for Lord Fluffy Britches. In the present, Elsie decides they should try to head home, at the protest of Patch, who thinks they should wait by the truck since the people will know where to go. Elsie points out that the man in the truck is dead and the driver is missing, and if you look back at the crash sequence, you'll notice the driver flying out of the windshield. Fact is, they're not going to be any help at this point. Patch continues to argue with her, believing the driver will return if they wait, and eventually their people will pick them up, like they do at the doctor. But Elsie tries to explain this isn't like the doctor. Their people didn't want to send them away, reminding him that the little girl in their family was shouting and crying when they left. As they argue, they hear a human voice nearby coming from a walkie-talkie. They follow the sound and it leads them to the missing driver, who's dead and hanging from a tree. The two cats freak out and Elsie says she needs a minute. She closes her eyes and breathes, then utters the phrase, 1, 2, 3 little kittens. This seems to summon the spirit of a great cat. It really reminds me of Simba talking to Mufasa in The Lion King. The big cat points out that Lord is lost again. In another flashback, we see Lord as a kitten being introduced to Elsie for the first time. Then the cat spirit asks Elsie if he knows what she did. I'm not exactly sure what's happening here, but it seems as if she's accessing some guiding cat spirit. Either way, it makes me wonder, what doesn't Lord know? Anyway, the spirit fades, but Elsie finds herself looking at an actual animal in its place. It looks like a raccoon drinking from a nearby pond, and Elsie approaches it, glad to see that they aren't the only ones out here. When the raccoon turns its head, however, its eyes are red and its mouth is frothing. Elsie realizes it's not a cat, and it slowly makes its way toward her, snarling. It moves closer, ready to lunge at her, showing its dripping teeth. It's a scary sight. Just as it goes in for the attack, Patch tackles it, and they both go flying into the pond. Patch manages to crawl out, and the raccoon flails wildly in the water. The terrified cats wonder what the hell is wrong with this thing. It crawls out of the water and starts swiping at them. Then a fox jumps in out of nowhere and takes a bite out of the raccoon's arm. Two more foxes appear, all looking deranged and foaming at the mouth. They lay in on the raccoon, devouring the creature. Already, this comic is more gruesome than Stray Dogs, and let me warn you, it does not let up from here. Elsie and Patch use this as a distraction to run away, but they don't get far before the foxes take notice. One of them has an entire raccoon arm in his mouth, by the way. We see their glowing red eyes in the background as the two cats flee for their lives. It's not much use though, these suckers are fast. The cats find a space under a tree trunk and hide, watching as the foxes move in on them, hissing and growling like zombies. It looks like this is the end for these poor house cats, when suddenly a loud snap can be heard from above. The branch that the driver's body was dangling from snapped, and his corpse falls right onto one of the foxes, crushing him beneath the weight. This scares the other two away, and the crushed fox panics as it bleeds out beneath the large man's mangled body. Absolutely brutal. Patch now seems on board with Elsie's plan of getting the hell out of here and trying to find their home. Then something else zips out of the woods right toward them and pins Elsie to the ground. It's Lord. We finally get eyes on the little bastard, and he's okay. This is a side note, but I like Lord's design, how he has this little tuft of hair on his head. It actually kind of reminds me of Sora's lion cub transformation in Kingdom Hearts 2. Maybe that's too deep a cut. Let's get back to the story. It's clear that Lord is a young and hyper cat, and he starts telling Elsie about everything that happened to him in rapid and disjointed succession. How the crash was scary and how many trees there are, the river he found up ahead, and even some deer he saw. He says him and the other cats chased some of the deer, and then the deer chased them back. Some of the cats got really angry all of a sudden and attacked the others. He mentioned some badgers and foxes as well that had something horribly wrong with them. Elsie finally interrupts his rambling and says that they need to get home. She doesn't see Patch and starts calling for him. We see him back by the truck licking his paw. It seems during the fight with the raccoon, he got a bad scratch. There's a close-up on his eyes, and they're steadily becoming red and bloodshot. He then runs ahead to join the others. This chapter ends with a definition of the term rabies, a virus generally spread through saliva of infected animals. The rabies virus is most often transmitted through a scratch or bite. Animals most likely to transmit rabies in the US include bats, coyotes, foxes, raccoons, and skunks. Symptoms include fever, headache, excess salivation, muscle spasms, paralysis, and mental confusion. It ends by saying, once symptoms appear, the disease is nearly always fatal. Yeah, so if you hadn't guessed it, there is a mass rabies outbreak in the area. If you pay attention to some of the chatter on the walkie-talkie earlier in the chapter, it seems like this is a particularly strong variant that spreads fast. It's a brilliant way to tell a zombie story involving animals and a legitimately scary idea. Now let's move into Chapter 2, The Bad Kind. Elsie, Patch, and Lord peek out from some bushes to see something horrific. Rabid wolves ripping apart a deer with sickening sound effects. Elsie points out that they're gonna need to avoid any other animals for now since something is seriously wrong. But as she speaks, Lord just casually strolls up toward the wolves for a better look. Elsie tries to stop the reckless cat and he just yells at her, "What?" Of course, this instantly alerts the wolves to their presence. Wolves are already pretty scary, but we're talking zombie wolves here. Elsie snatches up Lord and they hide in the bush while the wolves fan out and search the area. Luckily, the creatures don't find them and head off. Patch talks about how hungry he's getting and Lord says maybe they can ask the other cats for food. He gestures to a spot nearby where a group of cats are feasting on something. Once again, Lord just waltzes out of the bushes to ask them if they can get directions, and when the cats look up, it's clear that they're infected too. A chase ensues and the largest cat is gaining on them fast. It pounces for Elsie, but before he can take a bite out of her, the wolves show back up, and one of them bites the large cat's head off. It's gruesome as hell. Elsie, Patch, and Lord turn to see it's not just the wolves, but several other animals, including the foxes and some dogs. It's a full-on zombie horde behind them. They run as fast as they can until they're pinned to a tree. Then from above, a voice shouts down, ushering them to climb up the tree. We see two more cats on a branch that don't look infected. The three cats then start to climb, out of reach from their rabid pursuers. They probably should have thought of that earlier, but these are house cats after all. We learn that the two new cats' names are Jonas and Scratches, but before Elsie can finish with introductions, Jonas interrupts her, telling her to keep moving and never stop. He says to stick to the trees since most animals can't climb other than the bad cats. Elsie tries to stop again. It seems like she's going to do her cat spirit breathing thing, but Jonas butts in, saying if you stop moving even for a moment, they will catch you. And if these indoor cats want to make it out of here, they'll need to listen to him. They keep moving toward the river up ahead, but are cut off by a rabid cat, forcing them to drop to the branches below. Jonas says they'll have to pass through the river since the bad kind hates water. Patch doesn't like the sound of this, saying how much he hates water, and Elsie says, yeah, they all hate water, but there's no way they can jump across, so this is their last option. They find the shallowest point of the river and start working their way toward the other side, except for Patches, who tests his luck by trying to jump across tree to tree. And he actually pulls it off, saying, holy shit, I made it. The branch he grabbed snaps, however, and he falls all the way to the ground, landing on 2 feet, of course. He looks up and sees the disturbing group of rabid animals all on the other side snarling at him. Jonas notices Patch licking his paw and assumes he got hurt during his fall. Elsie starts scolding him for the jump, saying she expects this kind of reckless behavior from Lord, but not from him. Then she realizes Lord isn't with them. They look up and find that he's still on the other side of the river in the tree, not knowing how to get down. Jonas tells him to just use his claws, but Lord reveals he doesn't have any. We get another flashback here of Lord as a kitten and clawing the shit out of his owner and the couch. He's then taken to the vet to get declawed. In a conversation between the father and daughter, we learn that they had to do this after Lord gave her brother stitches, and that ever since he got lost, he's just too aggressive. It's another mention of Lord being lost. I wonder what happened to him. Back in the present, Jonas asks exactly what I was thinking. If he doesn't have claws, how did he get into the trees in the first place? Lord just says, I don't know. And below, the infected cats start to climb up toward him. Jonas runs across the river once more and leaps up to save Lord, grabbing him by the scruff Gruff and dragging him to the other side of the river with the rest of the crew. Elsie tries to comfort Lord, and Jonas just says keep it moving. In frustration, she finally snaps at him, asking who he is, where they're going, and what is wrong with all the animals. Scratches apologizes for Jonas, telling her that some outdoor cats aren't very sociable. Elsie asks him where they are, and Scratch just says he doesn't really know. He's always been in these woods, only now something smells different. Lord butts in, saying that he saw their home. While he was up in the tree, he thinks he saw the mountains by their house and the tall red trees near the creek. Elsie is pretty skeptical. The truck must have taken them miles from home. Patch comes in from the woods nearby and drops a dead rabbit they could use for food. He says he found it dead, but it's still warm. Scratches then takes a look at it and says it's not safe. He can tell just by smelling it. It's like the others, the bad kind. Patch looks a little uncomfortable. His eyes are still slowly turning red. Jonas then comes up holding a squirrel he caught, and this one's actually safe to eat. Lord's a picky eater and complains that he hates squirrels. Patch starts laying into him about how he always does this, but who cares, it's more food for him. Lord snaps back, saying there's real food at home, why can't they just go there? He insists again that he saw it from the trees, and surprisingly, Scratches backs him up, saying he actually thinks he does know where it might be. There is a creek by the mountain with houses nearby. Well, that's a good sign at least, maybe they can make it home. Elsie asks if Scratches can show them the way, but before he can reply, a rabid wolf jumps into frame and tears Scratch's neck out in a flurry of blood. Oh my god. The others have no choice but to run away as the wolf chows down on Scratch's body. Okay, so this new character we were just getting used to is dead. And get used to that sort of thing. This comic is completely unforgiving. Elsie hesitates and asks Jonas if they should do something, but he just says that's exactly what happens if you stop moving. They climb to a higher branch on the tree and look out. Lord points out the mountain and creek that he mentioned, and Jonas confirms that there are houses there. Lord says that's where their people are, and if they can just find people, they'll be safe. Elsewhere in the woods, we see several men in hazmat suits holding rifles. They declare a code orange. All four-legged animals are now assumed infected and contagious and are to be eliminated on sight. Okay, well, now they have a whole other thing to be afraid of. This chapter ends with another word, hydrophobia, fear of water, and that irrational fear of water is a common side effect caused by a furious rabies infection. Chapter 3, Survival Mode. This one starts on another flashback. Lord is still a kitten and is chasing a laser pointer around the room to the entertainment of his family when it cuts back to the present and he's doing the same thing, only this laser pointer is actually the red dot sight on a high-powered rifle and several men begin shooting at him. Luckily, Lord is a quick little guy and manages to avoid the gunfire. As he hides in the bushes, we can hear the men talking. One asks if the cat was even infected, and the other says it doesn't matter. Control says to kill anything on four legs. Just as they close in on the bushes Lord is hiding in, the men spot something up in the trees and fire at it. It was Jonas, who hops down to save Lord once again, chastising him for straying from the group. Meanwhile, Lord is still in shock that people could be trying to kill him. His only interaction with humans has been positive up to this point. They sneak away and climb back up in the trees. Jonas says that they never seem to hit anything up here. He doesn't think they can see very well with their helmets on. They meet up with the others and Jonas says that's the last time he risks his hide for Lord. Elsie starts babying Lord again and they notice that Patch has been awfully quiet. They ask if he's okay and he just utters the words back home. Jonas says they won't make it home if they don't start following the rules. First rule, keep moving and keep quiet. Even when they're not foaming at the mouth, there are animals out here ready to eat them. Rule 2, don't stray from the group and stay away from people. 3, we don't know who's safe out here and who's bad kind, so no strangers or new friends. Lord interrupts him, pointing out that they're technically new friends. Jonas just says, trust your senses. And rule 4, trust your nose. If something smells off, leave it. 5, don't chase sparkles. If it looks exciting, run the other way. We can see an example here of shining jewelry hanging in a metal trap to lure in cats. Most important, don't try to be a hero. Other cats can take care of themselves. Elsie just needs to worry about Lord. Just then they notice that Lord is missing. again. Worse than that, the reason he wandered off is because he saw a shimmering light and couldn't resist checking it out. He moves in on the sparkles, his eyes wide, and thank God it's not a trap. Instead, he finds the shiny collar of a cat. She seems like she's not infected and begs Lord not to hurt her. Her name is Gigi, and Lord tells her it's okay, he's a friend. Jonas and the others show up shortly after, and he starts sniffing the cat furiously, saying something smells a little off, and he's not sure if she's bad kind or not, or where she even came from. Gigi says she came from the town. Her and her partner Max lived in town with their people, but then the men came and they took Max. He tried to get loose and, well, they shot him. Gigi just ran as fast as she could until she ended up here, lost in the woods. Lord comforts her and tells her she can come with them, but Jonas is pissed, wondering if he heard even a single rule. Elsie looks at the nearby stream and says the water seems clean, so they all take a break to drink. Patch, however, doesn't seem to want to go near the water, and only we know why. Elsie tries to convince him, and then out from the trees, the foxes are back. And there's more of them. 6 ravenous foxes staring them down. They need to get back into the trees, but the foxes have already cornered them. Then Lord, that ballsy SOB, actually tries to attack the foxes, jumping right at them. The thing is, he overshot the jump and just flies past them. It's actually pretty funny, him attempting this badass sacrifice only to sail over their heads. Once he lands, he just keeps on running and a few of the foxes chase after him. It's just enough of a distraction to allow the other cats to make a break for it as well. The problem is Patch is acting weird and won't move. Elsie calls for him to follow while a fox slashes at her and Gigi. We cut to Lord, who's running like hell from the zombie foxes. He finally leaps on a tree trunk and climbs to safety. At the same time, he spots the men in the hazmat suits walking by, and it seems like they've spotted the other cats up ahead. Trying to save his friends, Lord leaps from the tree, and this time he doesn't overshoot it. He lands directly on one of the men's faces, forcing him to drop his gun and scaring the hell out of the other 2. Lord hisses as they point their guns at him, and next we only hear the sound of gunshots ringing out through the forest. Meanwhile, Elsie, Gigi, and Patch are still running from the remaining foxes, but they can't hold out for long. Jonas watches from the trees as one of the foxes leaps onto Patch, pinning him to the ground, and ready to tear him to shreds. Just then, Lord pops out from the bushes. I guess he survived the gunshots. Everyone, including the foxes, turns to look at him, and he just yells out, "Run!" Right behind him, the men come charging through, shooting everything in sight. Luckily, the foxes are the closest and largest animals nearby. As they get gunned down, the rest of the cats make a break for it. Afterwards, everyone seems more or less okay, other than Patch, who's still acting strange and won't respond to Elsie. He just says the word home and points ahead. Sure enough, it seems they've made it as they spot their house at the edge of the woods. However, there's yellow quarantine tape wrapped around the nearby trees and an evacuation order that demands all Creek County residents leave immediately. Any pets that weren't yet surrendered to animal control must be left behind. So who knows what these cats are going to find here. Chapter 4. Housebroken. They see that the front door is open as the cats approach their house, and Jonas starts coming up with a game plan to scope it out and make sure it's safe first. But of course, Lord just barges right in without asking anyone. Jonas says that this boy is a mess, and Patch gives Elsie a mean side eye, saying, "Yeah, well, whose fault is that?" Elsie looks hurt by the comment, and Gigi asks her what he means, but Elsie is just quiet. First things first, they need to find some food. Unfortunately, the pantry door is closed, but Patch jumps open and pulls the handle. I guess Elsie taught him how to open doors at some point. Speaking of which, Elsie has gone off upstairs alone, where she does her strange breathing ritual. 1, 2, 3 little kittens, and the cat spirit appears, telling her to rest and conserve her strength. Elsie says she has no more strength. They're home now and safe, but the spirit tells her she's still lost and that this place is no longer her home. She says soon he will learn what you did, before drifting away. Okay, something definitely happened between Elsie and Lord. Elsie then hears a human voice and panics running downstairs, but it turns out only to be the TV, or what they call the box on the wall. Lord turned it on while trying to eat the remote since the pantry turned out to be empty. Elsie tries to thank Lord for helping guide them home, but he's too distracted and they just end up arguing instead. Lord accidentally turns the volume all the way up and the other cats freak out thinking it's people as well. They enter the room and this part's great as the cats try to make sense of the TV from their perspective. Jonas in particular doesn't understand it since he's an outside cat, and when a commercial comes on for hamburgers, he thinks it's real and tries to get one. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, Patch is being extra mean and is roasting the guy for not knowing what a wall box is. Next, a nature show comes on showing birds, and Gigi and Lord join in, believing that if they could just get closer, they could get at them. It's a funny scene, and if you go back and pay attention to the words coming from the TV in the background, there's a little more insight into the outbreak. We learn from the news that the quarantine zone is rapidly expanding as the virus spreads, and that researchers blame a highly adaptable strain of the virus. Out of nowhere, the loud sound of a dog barking echoes through the house, scaring the cats half to death. They soon realize the barks are coming from the basement, and they're a little confused considering they never had a dog. Lord just walks up to the door and says he's gonna let it out. Of course, everyone stares at him in disbelief, telling him not to open that door. Jonas then very seriously warns him not to do it. Lord says okay, fine, he won't, but slowly backs towards the door and then leaps up and opens it anyway. I've never had such a love-hate relationship with a character. We've all seen a cat with Lord's personality, and it's pretty cute, but in a survival situation like this, he's really starting to piss me off. So the door swings open and Lord just walks in to the shock of the other cats. He comes back with a fluffy dog behind him, telling everyone it's okay, it's just Petey from next door. Although something is very off, and immediately Petey goes apeshit with red eyes and yellow foam spraying from his mouth. He snarls and swipes at Lord. It doesn't seem to scratch him, but it does knock him to the ground all the same. Man, this massive dog is scarier than the wolf somehow. It moves in on Lord to take a bite, and Jonas jumps in, tackling Petey to the ground and saving Lord once again. They run and Lord says he thinks something might be wrong with Petey. Jonas is like, are you dim? Yeah, something's wrong with them. The dog is lunging at every cat nearby, and they start heading upstairs. As they do, Patch starts yelling at Elsie, saying, this is your fault, you did this. What the hell is he talking about? Petey comes roaring up from behind them, and Lord jumps on his back to draw his attention. Now it's just him and Jonas downstairs to deal with Petey. As the dog closes in on Lord, he runs straight for the front door, and at the last second, leaps up and pulls it open, sending Petey outside. They shut the door behind them, and the dog runs off into the night. Alright, well, another crisis averted, it seems. The other cats come downstairs to make sure everyone's okay, and Jonas straight up slaps Lord across the face, calling him reckless and stupid. I can't say I blame him. Patch chimes in again and says it's not Lord's fault he's all screwed up. Elsie tells him to shut his mouth, but Patch continues. We get some flashback images as he talks about Lord. Lord was always high-spirited and rambunctious even when he first joined the family, something that Elsie found quite annoying since for a long time she was the only pet. After only a month or two, Elsie was fed up with him. She led Lord outside and told him they were going to play a game of hide and seek, only Elsie never tried to find him. She was just hoping he would get lost. Well, that's messed up. The family went out searching for Lord, but didn't find him, and Elsie went back to being alone and happy. Then one day the family stumbled upon Lord on the verge of death in the woods, scrawny and beaten up with his tail missing. It's a sad and horrible sight. Patch says he was quiet at first, and it took a long time for his body to recover, but his mind was broken. He came back wrong after that. Poor Lord doesn't even remember any of this, and in tears, he asks Elsie if it's true. She clearly doesn't have a good excuse for what she did. She just says she's sorry and she's not good with other cats. But Lord is overcome with emotion and bolts out the front door and into the woods. Elsie asks Patch why he's been so aggressive. Why now, of all times, would he tell Lord that? He's hunched over and doesn't answer her, and then he turns around, hissing. His eyes are completely red now, and foam is pouring from his mouth and nose. It seems Patch has finally turned, and his growing hostility was due to the infection growing inside of him. At the end of this chapter, there's a sad panel of a social media post. Petey's family posts a picture of him and say he's missing. Man, he looked like such a sweet dog before too. Chapter 5. Fall. Elsie says that they had always felt safe here. We get a beautiful shot of their home as the leaves fall. Patch is slowly moving toward Elsie, looking menacing as ever after his monstrous change. Jonas jumps in, wrestling Patch to the ground and urging Elsie to grab Gigi and run. He starts clawing the hell out of Patch, and Elsie tells him to stop and not to hurt him. Jonas looks back at her like, are you serious? And Patch takes the opportunity to get a leg up in the fight, smashing Jonas into the wall. Jonas tells them again to get out, and Elsie and Gigi run outside while the fight rages on. Shortly after, Jonas runs outside and manages to shut the door behind him. Gigi reminds him that Patch knows how to open doors and that's not going to stop him, but Jonas says he won't. He made sure of it. Well, that's an ominous thing to say. What did he do? Take his paw off or something? Either way, they keep moving forward, and Gigi mentions she doesn't feel very good. Elsie says they can't leave Patch. Lord ran away, and she just can't lose them both. Jonas then gives her the hard truth. Patch is one of them now, just like the Foxes, the Wolves, and Petey. He isn't her friend anymore. He's bad kind. Elsie just breaks down into tears and Gigi comforts her. Even Jonas looks a little guilty for being so harsh. Elsie finally gets back up and declares that they're gonna go after Lord. Jonas tells her there's no trees the direction Lord went and it's pretty dangerous. But that's exactly why Elsie needs to go. It's dangerous and Lord is out there all alone. More tears stream down her face and Jonas uses his paw to wipe them away. It's here he first notices that he has a large scratch on his arm. It looks like Patch got him in the fight. He steps back, realizing what this means, when in a truly shocking moment, a gunshot rings out. Jonas is shot through the head right in front of Elsie, blood spraying onto her face. She stands in shock, not able to process what just happened. Gigi cries out next to her, but her words are muffled to Elsie, and Jonas's body slumps to the ground. In the distance, the group of men make their way toward them, their guns drawn. Gigi desperately tries to get Elsie to move, but she's stuck in a trance. The men open fire at them, and this seems to finally get her moving. The two cats run for it until they come upon an old barn. Inside, it looks pretty gross. The floors are all sticky with some kind of green liquid. Elsie is still partially in shock and just standing still in the barn while Gigi runs around panicking, not knowing what to do. Outside, she sees the men approach the barn, which causes her to panic even more. Some slime drips onto Elsie from the ceiling, and this finally snaps her out of it. She looks up and finds that the ceiling is full of hundreds of bats, and from the looks of them, they have rabies. I can't imagine looking up and seeing that. It would be beyond frightening. Elsie tells Gigi to keep it quiet, but the men outside are getting close and their chatter wakes the bats up. Those beady red eyes look straight out of hell. The bats go crazy, flooding out of the top of the barn and swarming the area, attacking the men outside. It's pure chaos as the bats latch onto them. Inside, the cats are caught in a bat swarm of their own, and Elsie jumps into action, helping Gigi hide under a crate and crawling into a pile of hay herself. Inside, she waits, hearing the horrific screeching of zombie bats all around her. Slowly, they begin to lessen. She waits a while until it's gone completely silent and then climbs back out of the hay. Thinking they've got to move quickly while the men are distracted, she rushes over to the crate. When she lifts it up, she finds Gigi along with 3 baby kittens. It seems Gigi was pregnant this whole time, which explains why Jonas smelled something off about her and why she was feeling sick. Outside, snow begins to fall, and deep in the woods we see Lord. All alone, he walks by the stream with tears in his eyes. Back at the house, the back door is open and there's a large trail of blood leading out. It looks like Patch did make it out of the house and he's in rough shape. Jonas didn't manage to take his whole arm off, but did give him a pretty nasty gash. Patch then wanders into the woods, and that's the end of the first arc of Feral. These first 5 issues do a great job of building a horrific scenario and just never letting off the gas. Of all the horror comics I've read lately, this one really kept me on the edge of my seat the whole way through. I'm excited to cover the next arc as well because it's been hard enough watching these adult cats survive, but now we've added 3 kittens to the mix. So what do you guys think of Feral so far? Let me know in the comments. I'll be covering the next 5 issues called the Cat Lady arc next week, so stay tuned for that. Shout out to Kill Me Katie as always for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now. And if you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email me a submission to the address below with a name or social media handle. But I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grease speaking. Goodbye, friends.
You win some, you lose some, and no one can tell you why. So you go home again. You lick your wounds and say goodbye. You know you've messed things up this time, so you go home.